What's happening with Xbox? Hello and welcome to Triangle Square, the PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, as he is most weeks, is one Mr. Chris Figs. Chris, aside from your splitting headache, how are you doing today?
Oh, just dandy. How are you?
I don't have a headache, but I was on the road a lot today, and I don't like being in cars for extended periods of time. It's like the part of my job I like the least is having I get paid great mileage. I like that aspect. I don't like being in a car for 4 hours.
Yeah.
It kind of ruins my whole day. So you might see me squirm if you're watching this on YouTube around and probably pop my neck a whole bunch because I'm just generally not physically comfortable. But otherwise, I'm doing all right, Chris. But if you are new to the show, first and foremost, welcome. Me and Chris get together each week, usually, to talk about PlayStation or gaming at large through the lens of being PlayStation fans. So, of course, sometimes we'll talk about Xbox, as we are definitely going to do today, and what we think them and Nintendo and PC and all the things are doing well and what we may like or what we may not like. But we tend not to just bash for the sake of bashing. With that in mind, if that sounds like your type of show, stick around. Join us as we talk about, of course, all of the rumors and reports that seemingly are true coming out of Microsoft and Xbox. Talk about a little bit about the PS Plus games. Talk about some Elden Ring mobile teases that are coming out and more. But we always start this show off in a pretty time-honored tradition of checking in on what each other have been playing so that we can give you, or just me, each other, something new to put on our radar that we might want to play, or to maybe push you away from something that you were thinking about playing that may not be worth your time, as seems to be the case for almost every Suicide Squad review that I have read, heard, watched. I haven't played it yet, and I probably won't until it's very cheap. But let's get that little conversation quickly out of the way, Chris. I have never been so disappointed to have been so right. And I know that this is not anything too special. I think a lot of people saw the writing on the walls with Suicide Squad. First and foremost, I want to say, if Suicide Squad is fun to you and it looks like your type of game and you think you'll enjoy it, go for it. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of people look at this and it's a very surprising product to come out of a developer with the prestige of Rocksteady. Mm-hmm. So it's very weird to be vindicated online by watching everyone just be like, yeah, this is kind of dog trash. And this is, I don't think that I ever saw myself looking and being like, yeah, Rocksteady's next game is going to be like in the 60s on Metacritic. I would have never thought that sentence would come out of my mouth. So have you been watching any of the reviews for Suicide Squad?
Yeah, I've listened to a couple reviews. I'm not surprised. I played the NDA'd alpha or whatever, and I hated it. So this isn't a shock to me. I'm more shocked by, and I guess I really shouldn't be because this is the internet. But I was more shocked by how much certain people were defending it. And it's one of those things where, like you said, it's if you like it, that's cool, but everyone else doesn't. I was never on Twitter like, no, The Witcher 3 is bad, bro. And fighting against reviewers for it and calling them paid shills because they liked The Witcher. So it was super weird to me to see people just going after it. That was one of the things I took away from it. I'm like, just why are we doing this? I don't get it.
It's, as someone who often is moderately defensive of games that I don't feel quite get their due, I can understand the drive to want to be like, I got this game, I'm enjoying it, and I want to take a second to highlight what I do think is the good, while also acknowledging that there is some bad in there. And actually, I will do that here shortly with one of the games I played on my list. Not a whole lot, but again, I think that there is people that tend to give due to games they feel like may not get much, and I'm sure that there are redeeming qualities. I think even just looking at some of the gameplay footage and whatnot that I've seen, I think it's very hard to look at a game like Suicide Squad and not go, damn, even if the game doesn't look up my alley, it visually, in terms of character models and facial animations, looks probably the best I've ever seen in the industry. And you kind of look at that and go, damn, that's pretty wild. And then you look and you think, okay, well, hearing the voice acting, all the vocal performances seem excellent. Now, it's what's in the root of all of that and what that stuff connects to that really does start to kind of make you go, is it worth it? I think a lot of games kind of toe that balance. I'm sure, Chris, you've played plenty of games where the gameplay is just serviceable enough that the greatness of the story, characters, world, or whatever can carry you through all of that. You know what I mean? Or something like that. Or even a game with a bad story where the gameplay is so good that you're like, yeah, fuck it.
Yeah. That I have more than the other one, I think.
Yeah. And so I think when you look at that, I'm not surprised to see that people are enjoying it or even defending it. But it's very hard for me to think that there'd be very many people who don't understand part of why this is getting treated this way. And I think a lot of it is, regardless of, I mean, the quality of the game stands at the center of this, but I think a lot of it is not only the fact that the game does have questionable quality in a lot of areas, but I think you couple that with the fact that it comes from a studio that no one anticipated or wanted this out of. And while it's very easy to say, if this is the game they wanted to make, we should respect that, even if it is rough and we don't enjoy it. But I think that there's a very easy way to extrapolate out that this game probably came as a push, or at least the structure of the game at the very least probably came as a push from the publisher. I would love to be wrong about that, but I think a lot of people's thoughts on the game are being painted by the fact that they think that there's no way this game would have been made separate of Warner Brothers just being like, yeah, we want a game that we can push as a live service.
Well, I think the problem with that is that that's just not true, because apparently Rocksteady was already making a multiplayer game, and
beforehand.
WB was just like, hey, we got the Suicide Squad, why don't you use these guys? So,
well, maybe it's worth delving into that for a second.
Yeah.
Because what Rocksteady was actually working on, from everything that we can tell, or at least it seems very likely, and actually I think someone recently came out and brought the original rumors that came up of a Batman Beyond inspired Batman game, which is really interesting. I've been rewatching Batman Beyond, and then these rumors started popping up again of like, here's more information from the Beyond inspired Batman game. From everything I can tell, that game was coming along, and then while there is a chance that maybe the reports were just slightly wrong and it wasn't coming out of Rocksteady, and instead it was always at the WB Montreal or whatever it is that made Gotham Knights. If you look at it, a lot of the voice actor who was going to play Batman in that game, which was not going to be a Bruce Batman, it was going to be Damian Wayne, has come out recently in a stream and said that he would love to take a chance at being Batman again, and that he almost did, but the game got canceled because it got leaked. And if you remember, in 2016, those leaks of that Batman game came out, and they painted a picture of a Batman Beyond style thing that was going to involve Damian Wayne, and then it came out even further in 2019. And what was interesting about it is a lot of the things about the leaks got pushed into Gotham Knights. The fact that Batman was continued dead and that someone was going to be taking his place or whatever it was going to be, and the Bat Cycle was going to be a big part of the gameplay. All those things you can see clearly end up in Gotham Knights. And so I really think what happened is that they just took a lot of the assets and stuff that was made, if indeed it was Rocksteady, pushed it onto Montreal, which is exactly what happened with Origins, by the way. Origins was originally supposed to be developed by Rocksteady, but they got so ambitious with Knight that they decided to hand Origins off to Montreal. So if you look at it in that way, it would not surprise me to find that Rocksteady was making that game, and then WB was like, nah, we want you to do something else. We'll never fully know the story, or we won't know it anytime soon enough to be able to, really give detailed things on it. But it's still interesting. I think it's really hard to want to look at this and not think that there's some kind of higher up executive notes that came about as this. Even if there's not, it's a disappointing end result.
Yeah, it's definitely a disappointing end result. And I think, I think, not accusing you of this, because I think people do it all the time, but I think it's one of those situations where people want to be like, there's no way Rocksteady would have wanted to do this. And it's very possible that they just wanted to do this.
It's totally possible.
Because
yeah, go ahead.
But I will say, on the Batman Beyond thing, I think it was Schreier who said that all of what you just said was basically not true.
The only thing Schreier said is that it didn't get canceled because of the leaks. Where the voice actor said the reason it got canceled was because it all got leaked, and the leaks basically showed all the twists. Because it was like there was going to be a female Black Mask, which was supposed to be Roman Sionis' daughter. There was going to be like an older Harley Quinn. There was going to
Harley
be
Quinn, let's go.
Yeah, it's like gonna be like a 60-year-old Harley Quinn. It was supposed to be set like 10 years after Batman, and there is concept art and everything that kind of plays into here, and it's like a Batman suit that's more futurized with a red bat emblem. So even though it wasn't Batman Beyond, it was clearly being referenced by the idea of Batman bringing through. So point being, that would have been incredible.
Certainly would have been a better send off for Conroy's Batman. Which I just want to say on this show, Rocksteady didn't know he was going to die. Can we stop saying that? I really hate that line of
even if you don't like, I saw that too, and I was like, even if you don't like what Rocksteady did, this was clearly done.
Right. And he talked about how much he liked doing evil Batman. So I found it really gross when people were like, oh, Rocksteady disrespected a dying Kevin Conroy.
As if he was like, as if he came in and was like, guys, I want to voice Batman one more time. And they were like, great.
Right.
We know you're going to die, so we're just going to completely disrespect you once you're gone. Is that cool?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah. No, that's been quite wild. But look, we can move away from Suicide Squad after this. I just think I think that game is going to be an interesting point of discussion for the industry. Maybe it won't be, but I think that this is probably going to be an Anthem / early Cyberpunk level thing of talks about how the industry often gets things wrong. The biggest thing I can think about is that hearing everyone, even people who enjoy the game, pretty much unilaterally agree that, again, the game launches with a terrible end game that can't do enough. And you kind of go like, how have we been doing looter shooter online, multiplayer games for this long? And all of them launch with the exact same problem set.
Yeah.
And it's just really surprising. And the biggest problem I have with that is since this game had a pretty modest opening weekend, number-wise, I think this game may end up just like Anthem. I think that there's actually a decent chance that this game just gets abandoned. The only reason I could see that they won't is because it is DC, one of their bigger properties, but it's also Suicide Squad, which is not like super large for them. This isn't like, Harry Potter. You know what I mean? Right. This isn't like, oh crap, we're having problems. We launched the Hogwarts Legacy sequel in a rough state, or Quidditch. Yeah, we launched Quidditch in a rough state, but we can pour the money into it to save it because the IP is too big to fail. You know? I don't think it's like that.
No.
I think that they'd be okay just being like, we tried with the Suicide Squad. Let it go. Save our money.
It's a pretty rote point because it was the same with Marvel's Avengers. But from everything I've heard, this sounds like it would have been a pretty good single-player game. Like, there's one thing, I don't know, slight spoilers potentially, depending how sensitive you are to that, but in Skillup's review, he was talking about how Batman is basically a horror villain throughout the entire thing. And could you just think about like a Suicide Squad game where the whole time like Batman is like Mr. Xing you? And
that would be pretty cool.
Would be fucking awesome. But instead we got that, and it's too bad.
Well, Chris, let's move on to what we've actually been playing and not what we've been avoiding. So I know you've had a few things this week. How about we go ahead and knock out the game we played together and talk a little bit more about the Survivalists? Yeah,
no, the Survivalists is really fun. Glad we got to play more of it. It's a good game. We made some progress with our monkeys. we got a roving band of 5 monkeys now?
Yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
I think what I really like is, of course, we had fun the first playthrough, the first day that we played. But I think the thing that we really got out of yesterday, or Saturday. I don't remember what day it was. I've been tired a lot. I've been working too much. It was Sunday. Anyway, what we got out of that play session, I think, is we finally crossed the threshold of understanding the mechanics enough and kind of getting to push forward. Making the raft and actually seeing how the world continues to unfold has clearly changed the way I look at the game now and what we need to be doing. but also kind of actually starting to hit the steps of finding certain people, realizing that the monkeys can be helpful for not only crafting, but also combat and how their levels come in. And I think that we're just hitting that point where we're coming to grip with the mechanics just enough that if we can keep up a pretty solid schedule of playing together, I think we could get pretty lost in this game.
No, I think so too. I did like that moment we had where you were like, let's go do this. And I'm like, no, I'm having fun cutting down trees. Leave me alone.
Yeah, we were just sitting at the camp making items to we were just crafting and resource gathering and crafting and resource gathering. And I'm like, eventually we should probably try and push forward with what our objective is. But you're right. If you're having fun with the crafting and resource, go ahead,
Yeah. No, it was
play the game
experience.
The way that you think is best for you.
We had a lot of fun. It was cool. It's a great game. I'm glad that I picked it up for like $4.99. It's worth the money so far.
And like you said, this is for some reason the game that's stuck for us playing together. Like it seems like we're actually going to play this.
Yeah,
more often.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm glad you like it. I'm glad I like it. So it's been a lot of fun.
You have a far more. Seems like you had a weird time with the next game on your list because it was easy but grindy. Is that the best way to kind of say it?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, I'm not the best Tekken player in the world. I'm better with Dragon Ball and Street Fighter, but I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about Tekken 8. I was like, that sounds really fun, but I'm not going to buy Tekken 8 right now. So I downloaded Tekken 6, which was the PSP version on the PSN store, which was super weird. I don't know why they did that. But so while I was waiting for the PS3 copy of Tekken to get to my house, which it has arrived, I downloaded Tekken 7, and I got the platinum in that. So that is platinum 133, I think. And yeah, so playing that game, the only trophy I found really difficult was getting all the way up to one of the higher ranks as a fighter. So I played as Nina Williams the whole time. It's my main. And you have to basically go up through 12 different level ups of your skill. And that was just doing battle after battle. But like I was saying in our Discord, link below, you have to do it with one character, and the AI gets progressively harder as you go up in level, and then you'll hit a threshold where it's like, okay, you've lost 1,000 ranks and you just earned 400. So it was pretty difficult, and then I ended up getting that done last night, and that was pretty exciting. But yeah, the one trophy that sucked was do 50,000 damage in practice. And all I did was put on YouTube videos, and keep in mind, this took me 4 30-minute YouTube videos. So 2 hours, I guess, if you're doing math. And it was just me pressing triangle. It was, my name is Mayo, but for a bronze trophy.
That's so bad. I get it, but that's also, this is one of those things where we talk about it sometimes. The trophy's design is not inherently bad. It's just that it's one of those trophies where it's so easy to motivate the person who's going for the platinum to just see that trophy and then find the worst way to do it because it's just more efficient than sitting there trying to focus hard on the game. Like, yeah, you could have sat there for 2 hours, dead focused on the game, comboing off like insane. But it's a lot easier to just sit there and tap triangle while you're just watching something else because you know that you're getting hit, experience.
Yeah, and that was the worst part, right? Because it wasn't even like I was going into practice with Nina, right? Because I liked playing Nina. She's hot, and her moves were fun to do. So I played her the whole time. But I had to go in there with Law because Law was the only character who could do, I'm not exaggerating, he could do 30 damage a second. Okay, so that was the fastest way to do it, was by doing his triangle combo over and over again, getting 30 damage per second. And I think, like you were saying with the trophy design, like it's not a badly designed trophy, really, because as a fighting game, you're like, okay, people are going to go in here and they're just going to spend hours practicing. but I don't. That's not how I would practice any fighting game, right? Like I learned Street Fighter because I would go and play the arcade with every character, and then I would just keep doing that. I never went into practice mode, and I was like, let me practice my shurikens. I just learned how to do shuriken while playing the game. So I see the logic there, but
and that's the problem, is locking it behind specifically practice mode. So in that sense, you could say that that's where the trophy faults a little bit, but the rest of it is just, you're not the intended audience for that, because you're playing a fighting game that you're enjoying, but you want to be done with it and move on. It's kind of like Dirt 5's drive, 5,000 miles or whatever it is. And the reason I bring that up, but the reason I bring that up is because if you play that game normally and you beat the game and you're done with everything the game really has to offer, you've only done like a fairly small percentage of that. And the reason I consider that to be a bad trophy is because they look at it and you think, well, if you really love the game and you just want to play the shit out of it, then you'll reach that naturally. And that is true. It is a naturally arrived to trophy for someone who's like the diehard fan. But when the rest of your trophy list doesn't really push you to do that, or the rest of your game doesn't push you to do that, or it doesn't have the type of thing, I guess I don't like it when games have a trophy list where all it is trying to artificially make you play it more when you've otherwise reached your conclusion with the game. And you're like, I'm done with it, but I'm really annoyed that all I'm lacking is a single trophy. And that's where I wish that they would kind of have the foresight to be like, okay, there might be people who still want the platinum and get all these other trophies in a normal-ish playthrough, and then they get locked here. And that's where it's kind of on you to be like, you don't want there to be a really long span of you just trying to min-max, like we were talking the other day, where you're just trying to minimize how much effort you have to put into while maximizing your output. It's not a good setup. I run into it with a few games, and I always hate to see that, because I'm just like, it feels like a wasted trophy design when you could have designed other trophies that you would be unlocking along the way along that. Something like Tekken 7, like you're saying, take that out of practice mode, put that into do this much damage in any mode.
Dude, I would have been happier if it was do 200,000 damage between all modes. I'd be like, okay, that's totally reasonable trophy. But it was like one mode that I wasn't going to play, and then the damage is so little that it was painful. It got to the point last night where I didn't even see the platinum pop. So I actually got the platinum like 10 minutes before I stopped playing, because I wasn't watching. I was just hitting the button, like literally just like hitting the button on the thing and watching TV. And then just happened to look. And I'm like,
it's kind of like that, because, and then we'll probably move on from this one. But the last trophy that I can kind of think of that made me think of this and go, why would you put this in this game, was in Final Fantasy 15, where there's a trophy to level up a certain skill, but that skill levels up just by walking. That is it. There is no other way to do it. And I played everything in that game and was nowhere close. It was the last trophy I got. And so it kind of just became this thing where the most sensible way to get the trophy on a game I had otherwise literally exhausted was to put a rubber band on my controller, turn the TV off, go to sleep. And I had the trophy the next morning. And I just kind of think at the end of the day, what was the point of that trophy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like, all it did was make me get and of course, I made the choice to do it, but I wouldn't have gotten the trophy any other way, because once you've literally completed every other objective in the game and you still have like 50,000 steps to do, you're just not going to do it. There's not a carrot on a stick in the gameplay. The carrot on the stick is only in the trophy list.
Right.
And so that's where I was like, you got to try and find a way to merge those and say, okay, if we're going to put this trophy here, we've got to find a way in which the gameplay can continue to facilitate this. And those are usually the trophies that I run into, and it makes me stop getting a platinum, just like a Nier Replicant, where it's like that trophy is just so obnoxious, and no one would ever come across that in any way outside of trying to get this trophy.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I have to say left about Tekken is I really like the characters. Kuma, great character. Panda, great character. I will say some of the guest characters felt a little weird, like Noctis from Final Fantasy 15 is in the game. But the
conversation comes full circle.
It does. But the one that was super weird is Negan. And it's like,
really?
Yeah. And it's very much like Jeffrey Dean Morgan in the game playing Negan. So it was like 2 levels of super weird, where it's like none of these other characters are based on people, as far as I know. And then there's just this one that's a Walking Dead character who is Jeffrey Dean Morgan doing Walking Dead things. And I'm like, this is weird, but he was not good. I crushed that guy. Yeah, I got pretty good at Tekken by the end. I actually won a couple of online tournaments. That was pretty fun. So
yeah.
Anyway, what's next on my list here, Brett? What you got for me? I got the platinum in a game both of us have platinum now in Swordbreaker.
Okay, tell me that game is not hilarious.
It is very funny. When I got to the knife hand doctor, Freddy Krueger, I was like, what is happening here?
Here's the thing. I don't know if you know this. There are more of these.
Really? I didn't know.
I'm kind of, yeah. They came out with one in 2020 and then one in 2022. So there's really? Swordbreaker, and then it's like Swordbreaker Back to the Castle. I just looked it up. And then Swordbreaker Origins. And not even kidding, I kind of want to play the other two, even if there's no way to get trophies in them, just because what the fuck is that game? There's aliens, there's werewolves, there's plants that can eat you, there's fucking... It is everything in that game, and it's such a goofy game that is clearly somebody just having fun coming up with scenarios in their bedroom.
Right.
But I don't know how to describe it other than that. The game is janky, but it's got a lot of charm because of how weird it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I liked the amount of it that I was willing to play. So
best way to say it, I would never play it again. But I enjoyed the first playthrough. Which arguably Origins is a bunch of playthroughs because of the way you do it, but you know.
Swordbreaker Origins is on PS5, so
dude, watch it be sick.
It's $9.99. Yeah. But yeah, it was fun.
Watch it actually be excellent. That'd be so funny.
I think the only other games of consequence is I've been playing Medal of Honor Frontline, which is very good and very old. It's a hard game. I actually put it down today because I was making progress, and then I died at the end of a level, and it takes you back all the way to the beginning. And I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm not doing this again. I'm not doing this right now.
That's pretty rough.
But it's a game I love, so we'll definitely give it a shot. And then yeah, I just started Shadow of the Damned. It's great. That's a funny game.
Yeah.
Very, very of its era. It's very sexual and a little weird in some places, but not in like I'm offended and picketing EA, which it's an EA game, which is also weird. But it's like noticeable. It's one of those games where you're like, oh, you would get in trouble for this today. That's okay.
Well, it's very Suda 51. And you know, it's funny you say you get in trouble for this today. And I'm the rules tend to change a little bit for remasters, but the game is getting remastered. And I'm really curious to see if there ends up being some kind of self-censoring somewhere.
Probably.
I really hope not. But
do you remember the story about the Lollipop Chainsaw remaster where they changed it from a remake to a remaster because the fans were like, don't remake it or you will change it, and we don't want you to change it.
Well, yeah, 100%. And that's why I'm glad that this is a remaster, because I imagine it won't really get censored. Whereas if it were a remake of Shadow of the Damned, I think you'd have that problem. It's like, well, while we're already in here remaking it, why don't we try and smooth some of the edges that aren't as considered, friendly to the time? But I don't know. It's really weird. I'm a big fan of letting media speak for the time in which it was made, even when it comes to a remaster. Yeah, you're remastering it, and technically you're bringing it to a new audience. But I think everyone who plays it understands that this is not a game made for modern social sensibilities. And so I think it's kind of weird to try and go in and change the game, because the point of a remaster is really to make money. But if you want to look at us as a consumer on the outside, the point of it is to bring something forward that people may have missed originally and may not understand what people liked. And I guess the problem I have with it is when you do it's why I'm okay with a remake changing some things, because it's inherently like it is a new product. But when it's a remaster, it's like the inherent agreement should be that if you play a remaster and you talk to someone who played the original, your experiences should mostly line up.
Yeah.
And if you start to take things out for different reasons, that really can't happen. And that person didn't really experience a game that other people experienced. They're experiencing something that's been altered and changed. is it the end of the world? Not necessarily, but I don't love the thought. So hopefully it'll be a remaster with minimal changes, only gameplay focused of, how to maybe tighten up the shooting a little bit or whatever it be. But
I don't know. It's fun. And then I started. I don't have really anything to say on this other than the fact that I'm interested if you've played it. But I started playing Lost Dimension on Vita. Interesting little CRPG, JRPG kind of thing. I like it.
Lost Dimension. I don't know if I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a RPG. It's an interesting game. It seems to be about aliens and Japanese stuff. It's cool.
Yeah, I've never even seen the cover art for it, so that's interesting.
I was in a CRPG mood, and I was like, I wonder if there's any of those on Vita. There's not, but this is what they recommended on Reddit. So
it's about as close as you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So giving that a shot. What have you been playing, my friend?
Oh, man. So I kind of talked to you a little bit about this when we were playing the Survivalist, but now that I've gotten the Platinum in it, Pursue Force Extreme Justice, coming off of playing the first one, which I'd played before, and coming to this one, which I've never played, I'm surprised at how much every facet of the game in a single year's time, much like I had with kind of like I talked about with both of the Siphon Filter games, where it's like on PSP, their first game was very clearly their first game getting to grips with that console and the limitations of it. And then the next game was like, all right, how can we bust this wide open to do more on this system? And arguably, Extreme Justice pushes a lot more in its premise and concept than Siphon Filter did. Siphon Filter did a lot of refinement. This game refined and then decided to expand into new territory. I gotta say, dude, I love it. But also, it's funny. We had that little conversation for a bit about the implications in a modern setting of the social aspect of it. And what I thought was really interesting is the first game doesn't really do anything that you could really even look at today and be like, but the second game has multiple police being like, I gotta beat the shit out of him and all sorts of like police brutality-esque things.
It's funny.
It was funny because it's just like,
I went into it today and tried to give it another shot. I don't think I'm going to play it. I just, for some reason, I don't like it. But
it's not clicking.
I'm just over it. But there was one line one of the guys said where it was like, I love the smell of dead convicts for breakfast. And I was like, what the fuck?
It was preach. Yeah. It was preach. I'm well aware of that line because I thought the same thing. It's different. It's different when the bad guys are like, I love the smell of dead cops in the morning or whatever. Yeah. But when a cop is saying that to someone, it's like, hey, man, come on. But look, here's the thing. I'm going to open and close this real quick with that. I very much enjoyed that, even with that, because my thing is going towards, and I know a lot of people have different views on this, so I'm just going to say my view and go from there. However you feel is however you feel. I'm not trying to minimize it or anything. I have never understood why people put so much pressure for fictional cops and fictional things to follow the same rules that we think our cops should follow. If anything, the game is more interesting because these fictional cops have some stuff happen to them that you would look and go, any reasonable person would have a grudge because of this. And cops are still people. So in the context of this story that's going on, and definitely the craziness of this story and how it's already not very grounded, it's not really crazy for me to think that these cops that are being kind of overboard is anything. In this setup, I kind of think I said this last week, this is a future where convicts and different gangs have risen up so much that you can't drive down the street without worry about getting hit and your car stolen and shot and on the freeway. We don't really live in that world. So it's like, why would we try and impose the same rules? I had a really good time playing a game with inherently flawed cops. It didn't matter. Like, that's the whole point of the story. But I was really surprised this game has a story, and not just like we're taking gangs down and you're going to kind of see the ramifications of taking the game down real quick at the end of it. This one's like, no, there's acts, and the acts go through and they tell a consistent story, and you can't choose the missions in any order. They do happen in an actual order. Yeah. It was really interesting. And I think watching them perfect a lot of the things that I think the first game did a little replaying it, you're like, like the first game's roads are really simple and they're just really long, expanding things that sometimes you'll end up in the water. But this one's got much more twisting and turning, jumps. You'll get completely off road. There's shortcuts everywhere that you can take to cut down on time and better perfect your thing. They don't score you anymore, which I thought was really interesting. And they leaned a little bit more into cleaning up the UI and making it make more sense. And I was really surprised at how much spectacle came into play here, because we think about, like, Uncharted came out in 2007, but so did Pursuit Force Extreme Justice. And this game has my man climbing up the side of an airplane, shooting people, jumping over, blowing bombs up and putting things down the hatches on the airplane. It's just a wild game. It's like you're crazy. Getting on that. It is very crazy. It is very spectacle oriented, and it's a PSP game, and it looks like clean garbage because it's in 4K. But I won't say too much more other than that. I really enjoyed watching them really go. People enjoyed the first game. What if we really tried making a lore and story and consequences to actions and impact of actions? It's really interesting to see. So
it is. Give me a big budget Pursuit Force game.
I would, no joke. I would love that.
Me too. It would be fun. Won't happen, but it would be fun.
It's weird because it touches up against some of my favorite parts of like the early PS2 Spy Hunter games. It kind of like does things that are not super far from that. So I'd love to see, I'd like to see a big budget modern, or not even big budget, a fucking modern Spy Hunter game. Do a modern Pursuit Force. I don't care what the budget is. I just want to see what you do with more modern ideas, not limited by a handheld that has half the controls that you're used to.
To give me a From Software Pursuit Force game.
That'd actually be... You know what? I don't know if you have it in the news. You can tell me, but did you see the Last of Us thing? Where at some point...
It was inspired. Yeah. No, I didn't put that in
at some point, The Last of Us 2 was going to be a Souls-like melee-focused game.
Dude, that would have been so much more interesting. That's the way I'm going to put that.
That's the best way to word it. Speaking of interesting things, Chris, the next game I want to play was just one of those curiosity things, as I kind of told you. Fast and Furious Spy Racers Rise of Shifter.
Okay.
At first, I thought, before I remember it after I downloaded and started it, and was like, wait, what? At first, I thought it was the Fast and Furious game that they announced on stage when they had Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez come up on stage seemingly drunk or high during the Game Awards. But that game's already been delisted, so that game I can't play if I wanted to. Instead, what you get is a very interesting game that is aiming to be... So it's a tie-in to something else I didn't know exists. Fast and Furious Spy Racers is apparently an animated Netflix series that exists in the Fast and Furious world I did not know about. And this game is, of course, just that, but moved up. This is where I thought the game was interesting. It is it's stuck in a really weird, not necessarily bad, but also not great middle ground of wanting to be a real racer, but also wanting to act as a stepping stone for younger people who aren't as good and don't have as good of a grasp on mechanics to do some of the things you'd expect out of a racer, more like a Burnout or even like a Midnight Club LA, where it's like you have some of these extra mechanics. So like one of my favorite things about LA is that you had the ability to like turn your car up on two tires. That's not realistic at all. You could do an EMP blast. You have like a special move that you could select. This game goes like that. It's not a kart racer. You don't pick up boxes. There's nothing like that. But it's a game where you drift to build energy, and you can build energy just by driving well, but drift, jump, all those things to build energy. And then as you do them, you get to shoot paintballs at the people in front of you is the first step. The next step is to leave a paint grenade behind you. The third one is just straight NOS. And the fourth one is like a special ability that's specific to each car that can turn the tide. And I was really surprised at the level design, like the actual track design, is pretty, like, it's competent and it's not bad. Where I think the game fails in its thing is, while it looks better than you'd expect the kids-driven games to, it's got surprisingly good physics, and it's got surprisingly... It makes sure that it pays attention to things like reflections and smoke and all these weird things. But then it half steps from everywhere. So, like, Chris, if you play a normal racing game that's based around drifting, if you drift and you hit the wall or you hit someone else, it ends your drift, right? This game doesn't.
Sick.
And so it's really interesting because it's like you learn to be able to abuse the drift while it's driving, and it doesn't slow you down inherently. It makes it a little harder to control, but if you're in a specific spot, you can kind of just fishtail down the road, build up enough, energy to NOS or do your final finisher or whatever it is that you need. So I thought that was interesting. It's like, okay, but the biggest thing that took me back, and I think I could honestly see myself playing more than about the 6 hours it took to get this platinum. Sense of speed. It was just off. There's something about kid racing games where the sense of speed is always bad because you look down and you're like, it says I'm going 160 miles an hour, and yet I look like I'm going 20 on, my road outside in front of my house.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the game is better than I ever would have expected. Once I actually realized what it was, I almost deleted it. And then I was like, okay, let me see what it is. I put the game on hard to actually give some challenge, and that helped because apparently the game lowers your max speed on easy. And I think it has a different step up at normal. So it makes sense of speed even worse. But yeah, it's so close to being a competent racer that I'd almost be curious to see if you could give that developer a real racing game, what they would do with it. It will probably never happen, but I did think it was very interesting. And I wonder if there's any kids that have played this and it has pushed them to want to play something a little more mechanically demanding and a little more punishing and less forgiving. But who knows?
It's the it's the Fast and the Furious shifter to GT7 pipeline we've all been worried about.
Really though, I would like if EA would just like, look, you kind of got something going here. We haven't done shit with Burnout. That would never happen, first of all. Look, you also got to realize this is a budget game, but it's surprisingly in depth for what it is.
Yeah.
Let me say that much. There's no upgrades or anything that you can give to the car. So it's like, again, simple where it needs to be simple for kids, but with enough depth that if you are older, there's some fun to be had. I honestly think I'd probably call this game like a 6 out of 10. Okay. And if it had sense of speed correctly, I could probably see this being like a 7 out of 10. Like, it's not that bad of a game. It's a little shallow and a little too short, but it's also priced that way.
Sure.
And I didn't pay anything for it because it was on PS Plus. So
it's the perfect video game in that sense.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, it's a perfect video game in that sense. But anyway, let's move on into the community's take real quick before we jump into the news. Remember, if you want to be part of the community's take, that is where we, at the end of every episode, give you guys something that we want to hear your thoughts on, or at least before the following week's episode. If you want to be part of that discussion, then you can follow us on X at Triangle SQRD. You can find us in Discord, which is in the link in the description below. And we have sections where we reach out and we ask you the question and you have a chance to respond in the repository. And if we like your answer, we read it out. What we also do is read out from our patrons. We give them preferred reading because they give us preferred treatment with helping us keep the show afloat every month.
Cash rules everything around me.
So if you would like to join them, head over to patreon.com/Nartech and consider giving as little as $1 per month to support the show. We are very thankful for those of you who do. And with that, we asked a pretty simple question. And it was around the state of play last week. And this kind of conversation we've been having for a few episodes about not really knowing what most of Sony's first party's doing. So the question was, with state of play bringing us updates on PlayStation's partnerships, we're still in the quiet on most of their first party output. What first party studio do you hope to see most at the next event? And we got a collection of answers that I'm a little surprised on. Some of them are not so surprising. The first one's a pretty obvious choice, and it comes from patron Jehudi MD, longtime listener. He says Naughty Dog. This is where it gets interesting, though, Chris. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay.
I hope they branch out from their bread and butter action adventure titles and delve into RPG or RPG-ish games. Now, this is really interesting coming off the back of The Last of Us 2 at one point being a more Bloodborne-inspired, melee-driven game. But I struggle with this one for one reason. I feel like almost all of Sony's first party last gen became RPG-ish studios.
Yeah.
I don't really know if I want to see one more studio do that.
It's a give and take with Naughty Dog, because Naughty Dog is one of the best developers in the industry, so I would like to see what one of the best developers in the industry does in a new genre, and I'd love to see it. Could you imagine like a Fallout or a Bethesda style game from Naughty Dog? Like, would that be good? I would like to see it, but
Bethesda style games are potentially lacking these days, so I don't know.
We can talk about that in a little bit. But I do think there's a sense of like, I think they are the best because of what they do, and I think I would rather see a 9 out of 10 new Uncharted game than a 7 out of 10 WRPG, because we want to branch out. You know what I mean?
I think it's a mix. I like and even kind of empathize with the want to see Naughty Dog do something different. But much like you, it's kind of like I don't know where it's obvious, and there's not a whole lot of options, because genres in video games are starting to do just like genres in movies and music and everything, where you kind of borrow from a bunch of different genres. Like God of War is not really an RPG, but it definitely has RPG backend systems.
Yeah.
Horizon is kind of more of an RPG, but not really a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So it's
like a lowercase RPG. You know?
Well, I even bring that in. It's like almost every game they put out starts doing RPG-like things. I think Spider-Man may be the exemption, like the one title that was really exempt. And of course, that came before they even owned Insomniac. But if you look, they're doing RPG-like stuff with Ghost of Tsushima. They're doing RPG-like stuff with Horizon. They're doing it with God of War. Days Gone may be one of the few titles that, even it kind of, because guns have damage output ratings and stuff like that, something that you don't see from The Last of Us. Like, they have set damages that change, but you can't find a better version of the same gun with a higher damage stat like you can in games like Days Gone or Horizon. You know what I mean?
Cyberpunk. But you can't upgrade your guns, so you know.
Yeah, you're right. But so point being is, enough of their first parties doing that. I don't know what the obvious answer is, but I would like to see them break out. I just don't know what I'd like to see them do. Fucking first party or first person interactive sim? I mean, I don't
make a football
immersive
game.
Sim? Fuck
make
it.
a Madden competitor.
Like, I know someone's gonna be someone would be so upset about that. They'd tell a story as the football's in the air. The whole game would be a story about the football and its journey alongside. You know what I mean?
At one point, I thought I was a baseball.
At the end of every game, there's like the Last of Us factions, the team that you're chosen and how much you gained or lost, and it's like the respect from the other footballs that people use.
It's like Tom Brady has dysentery.
That'd be wild. I feel like if they did make one, it would end up being a lot more kind of like the I don't want to say sim, but Blood Bowl would be interesting. I was going to say something a little bit more like the college football games, where it's like you live life and do school and do football.
Are you saying you want Naughty Dog to make a Persona football game? Because low-key, that's actually sounds great.
I mean, I think you might actually want Persona to make a Persona. Which they have Persona Soccer, don't they? Like Strikers, P4 Strikers, something like that.
That's not a soccer game, Brad.
I don't know what it is. What is
just
it?
Another.
Is it a sport game?
No, I think it's just. I've never played it, but it's another Persona type game.
Well, now I gotta know. Persona 5 Strikers is an action role-playing game by Omega Force. Interesting. Oh, it's just, I should have known whenever it was Omega Force. It's literally just Dynasty Warriors and Persona, as they've done with everything. Okay, well then let me take a step back and say they make a fucking dancing game in Persona. I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, fuck it, let's make a sports game.
I would be into it.
Final Fantasy Blitzball game win. Everyone says that. I don't actually know if that'd be very good, but if Square wanted to keep trying in live service, fucking try it. It's something. It may just work in your favor.
Yeah, give it a shot.
But yeah, I just think that was a really interesting answer to it, because I can see wanting them to do something way out of their realm, but I just don't know what. But that's why I think right now, as I'm having to answer it kind of on the fly, if I was going to say what type of genre I'd want to see them move to, I'm going to go, I think that they would do well to do like what Arcane does, because they're very particular in their storytelling and detail. Do a first-person immersive sim on a spaceship. Fuck it. Do Savage Starlight first-person immersive sim.
I'm in for it. I still think they're going to make a fantasy role-playing game.
Give Avowed a run for its money.
I would like to see it.
Released the same year on the same platforms.
We can't have competition on the platform, Brett.
You're right. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Josh Ayers, another one of our patrons, says it's not the fun answer. I think it is a fun answer. I mentioned him last week. But Studio London, the key art they put out looks cool, and I'm interested to see what it is. I am too, and I do think it looks cool.
It does.
I'm a little bit on the edge of that, because everything that they've talked about and kind of that's been reported around it, it does seem like it's going to be a live service game, or at least a multiplayer-focused game. And I'm kind of a little inherently less interested in multiplayer-focused games, but that doesn't mean I'm not willing to try it and be proven otherwise, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting answer. Now, here's one, Chris. Your boys that you love over at San Diego Studios, Stingray X, one of our patrons, says that he would like to see them working on a new IP again.
I would like to see it. I keep saying that, but yeah, I would be interested in that. I don't think Sony San Diego is ever going to make anything else. I don't think they should, and I don't think they need to.
I think the last thing that they did at all that wasn't MLB in forever was when they did XDev work with Killstrain. Yes, I'm pretty sure that they did that. And maybe one of the other little 3 XDev games they did all at once. It was Killstrain, Drawn Together, and I can't remember the last one right now. But
is it,
yeah.
What's the mech? No. Guns Up? That's one.
That was it.
Was it? Oh, shit. That was not the one I was thinking of, but hell yeah, I got it right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was it. Guns Up, Killstrain, and Drawn Together were kind of their 3 really early. Yeah, Drawn to Death. Drawn Together is an excellent show. But yeah, those were those 3 kind of like early live service, but low dollar risk games that just didn't pan out.
The game I was thinking of was Mercenary Kings.
Oh, God.
It was a launched PS4 game.
You just brought me back to like Nom. That's rough. Now, I like this answer. This comes from Rude Days 93, another one of our patrons, and he says Blue Point. And I like that answer. It's mainly because I found them the most interesting, considering they've mostly been a remake studio, and if this new game is a brand new IP or not. Here's the thing. Everything that we know points to the new game being a new IP. Or at least not a new IP. Let me back that up a hair. Everything that points to it is an original title. That does not mean that it's a new IP. It may just be a new game and their original idea within an existing IP. And that is part of what makes it so curious to me. Because we've often talked about how a studio that handles remakes at a level where they try and break in and fully understand all of the mechanics of the game that they're going are a prime candidate to deconstruct a game and try and build another one off of it. The question there becomes, do they or have they since brought in the ability to write? Because here's the thing about remake. You don't need to write. You don't need writers. You don't need anything. You just need people who are looking at reconstructing what's already there. And so if you don't need writers and you don't need scenario writers, who are they bringing in to do that? That's my big curiosity. And that's why I'm very curious to see what they do. And if so, who they've hired. What I think is really interesting is who they may have hired if they had to hire someone for that has not been leaked. And I think if it had, you'd probably get a bigger idea of who it might be, or what the IP might be.
I'm just gonna say this, and we can if it's right down the line, we can pretend I'm just a savant and I have sources. Looking at the leaked image, I think they're making a Legends of Dragoon sequel.
Oh, that would be really interesting.
Because this is not an original point. I think it was on a podcast I was listening to, but they were making the point that Bluepoint isn't saying they're making a new IP. They're saying they're making original content, which I think reads like we're making a new game in someone else's series. Mm-hmm. And going back to that ridiculous tweet they had, 6 years ago? Do you remember? A symphony of silent knights and a siphon filter of dragoons or whatever. I think they're making Legends of Dragoon. That's just my guess, but it's interesting because looking at what Microsoft's slate is and looking at what Sony's lacking, it would kind of be the perfect thing for them to do, right? Make a new J/W-ish RPG.
WJRPG?
Yeah.
Western Japanese RPG.
A JIRPG, a Japanese-inspired role-playing game. So that's my prediction.
Look, I don't think that's a crazy one. I think that there's a strong chance they're working on some kind of Japanese series, but I would love to also be wrong there. There's plenty of games I'd like to see them do. But what I think would be really interesting is at one point, after Siphon Filter kind of came to a rest, up until Days Gone, Bend was that studio for Sony. Bend was hey, we have IP that has value still as far as we see it, and we have teams that are not able to work on it or have moved on into other things or what have you. And so we want you to do it. And so we saw them do that with Resistance when they did Retribution. We saw them do it with Uncharted. And from everything we can tell from the director who has now since left, John Garvin, he was saying that they had pitched an Infamous Vita game. So that was really their role. I know, dude. But that was really their role within the studio. And I've always thought it was interesting to look at a studio like Bluepoint, whose bread and butter, as mentioned, is remakes and high quality remasters, and say, okay, they can become our new Bend, since Bend has wanted to do this thing. And it's kind of like, we can have them do remakes here and there. We can have them do teams with new ideas and new games within existing IP. And I'd be okay seeing that. I would also be very curious just to see what they can come up with on their own, to see them 100% do new IP. I don't think that's what's happening. That's not really the kind of... When you hire at a studio like Bluepoint, you're hiring for specialty work. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be really interesting for them, not impossible, mind you, but it'd be really interesting for them to kind of pop out and come up with an amazing new IP that does really well. And I don't think Sony would really want to take that chance because of the fact of what they're known for. But
I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't understand, especially in the era of Sony remaking fucking everything, why they bought a remake studio to make
and
new
immediately
IPs. Yeah. Right. Why aren't they doing, why are we not getting hey, Bluepoint's remaking all of Uncharted. It's all going to be in one package,
Yeah.
Uncharted, Drake's Legacy, can do Among Thieves. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm kind of in this weird mindset where it definitely seems to me that the remake talks from them right now are entirely based around, it seems like what they're doing right now is they're testing studios that they're wanting to do partnerships with. So I think Ballistic Moon is a good example of, you want us to help you, you want us to do a game with you, and you want us to partner with you, and then this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you a remake of a game that is maybe somewhere in your wheelhouse. And we've seen them do this in PS3. That's exactly how Sanzaru ended up making the fourth Sly Cooper game. They came to him and said, we want to make Sly Cooper. And Sony was like, handle the remasters of the trilogy for us. And depending on how we like working with you on that, we'll determine whether or not we want to do an original game. And it moved forward. So I would not be surprised at all. And of course, as we can see, Ballistic Moon does the Until Dawn remake and then goes on to make a new game that is inspired and very similar to that. Definitely since Sony lost Quantic Dream as a partner. So Sony used to have that type of game as a leg of one of their exclusives, and now they don't. So Ballistic Moon is actually a smart choice to do that, but it is kind of a little disappointing to see that they're starting with a remake. And it's primarily because, like we keep saying, games take so long to make that testing a studio in a remake that's probably still going to take them 2 years to make, or has taken them 2 years to make, kind of still makes you go, damn it, that just means we're 7 years further from whatever Ballistic Moon's doing next if this type of game development cycle continues. I got one more I want to pull over from our Twitter, which I really liked. And it came from Matthew Kennedy. And he says, I would personally love to see what Bend and Bluepoint are working on. I think those two studios are a total mystery. And I like somebody bringing Bend back into this because Bend's kind of been in this weird spot where they got a lot of love suddenly from Days Gone. And even though it seemingly did not perform to the way that Sony wanted, it is Bend's best-selling game, from what I understand. And so when you look at that, and Bend kind of got put on the map in a way that they really weren't before, I think a lot of people who have come to enjoy Days Gone, even if after that version of Ben kind of came and gone, I think a lot of people are very interested to see what they're doing. Definitely because what they're doing got so publicized with that they're going to be an Uncharted remake studio. No, they're not. They're going to be a new Uncharted studio. No, they're not. They're going to be a multiplayer help studio for Naughty Dog. No, they're not. And I think that's people really connect with that masters of your own fate kind of thing that's going on. And the way that was reported definitely tried leaning into that. Like, no. We're giving Bend the freedom to create what they want. And we're going to step back. And I think they're really trying to ride into that PR. So Bend's a good answer. I think that's a pretty cool one. Yeah. Do you have do you have a studio that you don't feel like was mentioned today that you feel like should have gotten a shout out?
Not really, because I think there's not many other studios. I would like to see the Dead Deviation game. But I mean, here's the thing: we know what Insomniac's doing for the next 15 years. We know what Sucker Punch is doing. I mean, even still, ostensibly, we know what Naughty Dog is doing. So, unless I'm missing something, like I can't, Asobi really is the only other team I can think of where I'm like, what are they doing?
Yeah, I know my answer. Look, a lot of the studios are they seem accounted for. So it's like, would I love to see Polyphony Digital make something other than Gran Turismo? Sure, I'd definitely try it out. But that just seems so unlikely, just like San Diego seems so unlikely to do anything besides what they are made to do and what they kind of keep up with. Sucker Punch wasn't mentioned, but I think that's just because everybody kind of has a general feel that Sucker Punch's next game is going to be more Ghost of Tsushima. So the only one that I feel like wasn't really mentioned today that I have a love for is Media Molecule. After Dreams, I would love to see them kind of get a little success story. But who knows? I think it's how risk averse is Sony being with them right now? That's the real question.
You think they can tear themselves away from Dreams?
Well, they're being forced to, whether they want to or not.
I know it was not the best. It was not the best work, but it felt good. Honest days.
Yeah, they're being torn away from Dreams. So with that in mind, thank you everyone who responded into the community's take. If you would like to be part of the next one, remember, follow us on social media. And I want to take a quick second to remind you that if you're listening to this on a podcast service that allows you to rate and or review, please consider doing so. It helps other people know whether or not the podcast is worth their time, and it may bring in new attention. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and move into the news. And the first piece of news is very quick, very easy to throw away. The PS Plus games we talked about last week are now available to everyone. So if you want to play them, go in there, jump in, play them. You got Foam Stars, and a question I got asked, Chris, I think I know the answer for you since we didn't talk about it at all. Question I got asked from Velvet Thunder of Velvet's Corner fame was whether or not we were going to try Foam Stars before the podcast. And the answer for me was I didn't have the time to. I knew I didn't have the time to. But B, the game doesn't, even though I think the game has a chance of being the next Rocket League if it's cared for correctly, it does not look like my type of game at all. I have zero interest to play that game, even though it's free. Like, I guess technically my interest is like move from 0 to 0.0001, but it's still super low. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm going to try it. I have it downloaded. I'll probably give it a shot after the show because there's really no reason not to. It's a free video game.
I'm with you, but I know where I'm at, right? It's like if anybody could look at that, but I'm trying to figure out what I want to play, and that's just I have a lot of options in front of me. And what's the problem I'm having here is that, is it a free game? Sure. Is it a new game? Sure. But even though it's free and there's no cost in terms of monetary, there is cost in terms of time. And right now, I just don't want to give my time to that because there's just not enough. There's not a strong enough correlation between my existing interest and the fact that it's now free. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I could see you playing it. You like to play multiplayer-driven games a lot more than I do. Definitely competitive multiplayer-driven games.
Yeah, my hope is to just text Sean and be like, I regret to inform you that Foam Stars is good. Please download it. You know? Like, that's what I want, so...
Yeah, that's like a worst case scenario.
Yeah, exactly. Before I get into the VR game that comes out on Friday.
What VR game is that?
The medieval one that comes out on the 8th. That was at the State of Play. I can't remember its name.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was a Friday title. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
soon.
Cool. All right, good. For a second there, I thought you were talking about the medieval Desmond's Quest from PSVR 1, I think, or PS Move. It may have been the PS Move title.
Really?
Ooh, yeah. I know we talked about, I know we were moving into news. I want to do one small tangent. Chris, I am at a real freaking standstill. I think I might give up Milestone games. And the reason I say that is I cannot land on anything to do for Platinum 200 that would not just put me so far behind for the rest of this year, because any game that I feel like is worthy of 200, if I'm actually putting thought into it, has like 100 to 150 hour Platinum. And I kind of get into this thing where it's like, do I care enough about 200 being something special to put me behind on playing Banishers or playing Final Fantasy 7 or whatever else is coming in February? You know what I mean? And I'm kind of in this point where it's like, I'm starting to think that I have a list of like 7 games downloaded already that I've been wanting to work my way through. And I've kind of just been gauging what I'm going to play up until I realized 200 was here. Originally, it was just whatever draws my attention that I already have downloaded for the most part. Until Banishers comes out, because it's only like a week away, maybe, if even that. So since I'm in that thing, I'm really hesitant to start anything crazy or try and find something new and download when I already have Metal Hellsinger downloaded. I have Tunic downloaded, and that has been in the back of my mind as something I've been thinking about playing for quite a long time. I'm kind of brain dead right now on focusing on those, but I have about 3 or 4 other titles that have just been. Cocoon is one of them. It's just a bunch of games that I've had downloaded on for the rainy day. Like, one day I'll start these, and I don't really know if I want to try and slot up a 120 hour Kingdom Hearts playthrough to try and platinum it. Because I'll tell you what my actual first instinct was.
Yeah, you do.
Batman Arkham City. Arkham City is like 100 hour platinum, and I don't think I care enough right now. That's probably something for, I looked it up because I was like, it can't be that bad, right? I platinumed Arkham Knight. It's like 80 to 100 hours, and I'm like, not right now. Like, that's the thing is, all the games that you would make as a milestone platinum tend to be games you've already played, but there's so much I haven't played coming out and that I already have in my system that it's like, why would I do that when I can just not give a shit and let it be whatever?
Isn't your answer just whichever one of the ones you play next you like the best, you just platinum that one, and that's your 200?
That's exactly.
And then you move on?
That is exactly it. Because
like,
the other thing,
because I'm going to platinum for my 150 Persona 5, and then 200 Persona 5, and then 250 Persona 5. That is my plan. So
that's sick. So here's where I get into a spot with me, though. Right. The real problem with that is that any game that I'm doing that, I can't play anything else that I run the risk of wanting to platinum, because if I take a break from whatever game I'm playing and go play Banishers, and I really fucking like Banishers, then I can't platinum it until I go back and platinum the other game, because if I platinum it, Banishers becomes 200, which maybe that's not bad. Maybe I could let it be that way. But I think I'm just going to play what I'm playing, and if Banishers comes out and whatever I'm playing at the time doesn't stick enough for me to keep going, I'll just move to Banishers, and that may be platinum or 200 if I like that game enough, you know?
Yeah. I think the only thing I would say you shouldn't do is just be like, don't download like a Ratalaika game. Or
for sure.
Or you just reverse psychology yourself and go get like a 10-minute platinum and then just move on.
200's gone. I don't have to worry about it anymore.
That's what I did, because I don't remember what I wanted to do, but I was stressing the same way over my 100th. And then I just popped MLB 22 and moved on with my life.
Yeah.
Just go pop a quick one.
That's true. I could do that. The other thought that I had was, now it's time to replay The Last of Us 2 and go ahead and get that trophy. That would be a pretty cool 200.
That's not a bad one. Last of Us 2, 200th platinum. It's kind of all working out in your favor.
If only The Last of Us Part 1 had been my 100th platinum, but I don't think it had. I'm pretty sure that was like 130 something. So, yeah.
That would have been
unfortunately. All right, Chris, keep moving along. This next one, the latest beta for the PlayStation 5 system software, introduced new features like DualSense controller sound enhancements and share screen interactions. Additionally, it allows users to adjust the brightness of the PS5 console's power indicator, which is a really weird granular thing, but pretty cool.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, do I care at all about that? No.
I thought it was weird when people cared about how... it depends on your reason. When people said the DualShock's light bar, and even the DualSense's light bar is too bright and they want to adjust it down. I mean, I guess it's a lot closer to your eyes, but I have never cared about how bright
that I get.
But if you want it for battery, exactly.
Yeah.
But some people didn't give a shit about battery. They're just like, it's too bright.
That's weird. It's weird. It's like the beep thing. It's like, I don't get that, because if Sadie ever heard the beep and started yelling at me, we're not dating anymore, because clearly you don't respect my hobbies. Like, it's that simple. Like, look out for yourself, kings and queens. If your man is yelling at you because you're playing video games, find a new man. It's way easier for you to find one who likes your hobby. So go do that. Like,
statistics don't lie. No, look. I'm with you. I've always thought that, we've talked about that a little bit before, but I've always thought the idea of, like, unless you have a bunch of other problems going on already, and y'all have been talking about how part of y'all's problems is that you play too many games, and then you turn the system on and she's like, I just can't anymore because you clearly don't care. That's a different context. Right. But if you're just sitting there having a good day and you and your wife are fine, and then she goes to sleep and she hears the beep and she's like, absolutely the fuck not. Yeah, y'all have got deeper problems that y'all have not talked about yet.
Exactly. And if it's your wife at that time, I hope you got a prenup, because good Lord.
Oh,
she's taking the PS5 in a divorce.
Okay, Chris. Speaking of divorce, let's divorce ourselves from that topic for a second to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It got a state of play that happened today. I chose not to watch it. I already know I'm getting the game, but the PS Store itself seemingly leaked a demo coming after the show. So right now you can go ahead and jump in and play that demo. And look, that is what it is. It's a state of play. I didn't watch it. As far as I know, Chris didn't watch it.
No.
Buy the game when it comes out if you're interested in it. Let's move along.
Yep.
All right. Now, this next one's a lot more interesting, and I'm curious if you have something to say on this one, because when I saw it, my immediate thought was, what? But I want to hear, I want to read it again and see if it changes. So Tencent is reportedly working on a mobile version of the critically acclaimed game Elden Ring. According to recent reports, this mobile game is said to be a free-to-play title with in-app purchases, similar to the successful model seen in Genshin Impact. Elden Ring originally released on February 25th of 22 for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Series SX, PC, and it's been a massive success. We know that much, selling over 20 million copies worldwide within its first year. This news comes after Tencent reportedly grew its financial stake in From Software, which currently sits at 16%. Do you remember earlier, Chris, when I was saying that for... Do you remember when I said that corporate bigwigs making decisions that do not track with what's going on elsewhere? I want to tell you right now, a free-to-play Souls-like bearing the same name as a From Software game that is going to have in-app purchases. Am I smoking crack here, Chris? This sounds like a bad idea that I do not know how this will be successful, at least off the back of Elden Ring already. If this is successful, it's in spite of the fact that it's got the same name as a beloved game. It has nothing to do with the fact that people who already loved Elden Ring went in droves to play this mobile experience. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling like there's going to be a lot of 50,000 soul packs sold, which is very depressing.
You know what's crazy about that too? Is this an original title? It has to be, right? It can't be. It's not Elden Ring. Otherwise, how are they going to retrofit the existing Elden Ring with this?
I don't know.
How are you going to play the existing Elden Ring on a mobile device? You can always say, well, you can play it with a controller, but we've got to always think about the people who are just going to play it by hand. That has to be a viable method. I don't know how you do it here.
I mean, people play competitive Fortnite on the phone. So, like,
That's true.
I don't know.
That is true.
I originally, when I read it, I thought it was like a 1-to-1 Elden Ring. And I was like, oh, I mean, I'll play that, I guess, and see what happens. I hope what they do is like a portal opens in Honkai Star Rail and they just like fall out into Elden Ring's world, into the Forgotten Lands. That I would be like, I'm into this. This is dope. Like they got to go and Honkai against Melania or whatever. I'm in.
Yeah. Look, what's really crazy about this is that Elden Ring wasn't really for me, but I played a good chunk of it before I finally decided to put it down. And one thing that became clearly obvious to me and very evident in talking to Saul and other people who have played it, if anything, there's no reason to say that they couldn't put a Souls pack in to be able to buy Souls. But I think Elden Ring already really dealt with a lot of people's complaints about how From Software games are typically structured, and the fact that since the game does not make you do anything really in a specific order, if you're having problems on a boss or anything, you can just go off, find a new area, kill new enemies, gain more souls, gain more levels, defeat a boss that's more in line with what your current skill level is, beef yourself up, go fight that same boss just stronger, and then hopefully get past it. That is it. They've already simplified, and if you want to view it in a negative light, I don't mean it this way, but they've bent the knee to the fact that some people had problems with how difficult their game structure was, because it was, well, you have to beat this to get to the next boss. And Elden Ring doesn't really do that. So, in looking at that, this is just a weird thing. If this game is a success, I'm just going to actually, let me take this back. If this game is a success amongst Souls-like fans already, I'm just going to determine that I don't have any insight worth value in this gaming industry. And maybe that's been the case all along. So, do with that what you will. If anything, this goes to show that massive success cannot come without someone going, yeah, I want to buy to that.
You know what? I agree.
I might feel different if this was From Software developing Elden Ring for phones. But no, this is Tencent being like, yeah, we're going to make an Elden Ring game because it sold 20 million and it's got great name cachet.
You know what? Here's the thing, though. I think I would hate your scenario more. At least this,
that's
I'm like,
fair.
You know what? This is what they do. Whatever. I don't have to see this, and I can ignore this. But if the next FromSoft game was a Elden Ring gacha game, that would be
Well, I don't mean
worst
gotcha.
timeline.
All I mean is an original Elden Ring game or even a port or whatever, but being done by From Software where it's going to meet your minimum expectations.
I wish they would do that and just reinvent another genre. Give me a Souls-like Elden Ring tower defense game.
Fuck it. Do it. Let's go.
The end of every every time there's a boss wave, you have to actually go in and fight the boss, and then the rest is tower defense.
Hey, there was a game that maybe it even did that. I ended up never playing it, unfortunately, but there was a PSP game that was called damn it.
Field
PSP
Runners? The greatest tower defense game?
Hold on. No, it was a PSP game, and it had something to do with summoning, or I know that it's going to end up keep bringing up Summon Night, but it was it was a Square Enix game, I'm pretty sure, and I thought that was going to be it, and then I played a very small section of it, and was like, oh, I guess that's not it. But I've always thought that's a great idea. Even if it's not tower defense, even if it's something that's more like, all right, you're going to do large scale, pulled out, war combat where you create a legion of enemies and you keep spawning them in and you control things that way and you push on the battlefield. And then once you push enough, we pull you down and in a third person camera over the shoulder or whatever, you get to go on and fight in a completely different play style. And I've always thought that would be such a great idea. And it just never happened. I don't know why.
Yeah. I would like to. I'm not even going to say it. I'm just.
He's going to wish it into existence.
I was going to say I would like to see it again, and then I was like, "No, I'm just going to stop speaking, so I don't say that for the 18th time in this show."
Okay, it's going to kill me. I cannot think of the name of this game. I will eventually find it and be able to tell you, but not tonight. So, the next piece of news, the gaming community is buzzing. Oh, man. This is a big one. Let me ask you this, Chris.
Read it, baby.
This is the last piece of news, yeah?
Yes, I put it last on purpose.
Okay. I thought so, but I wanted to be sure. So, guys, listen. This is the final topic we're going to talk about. We're going to probably try and be reasonable, talk about this, and then let Chris get out of here. Hopefully his head's feeling a little bit better, but my neck is very tired itself. So you know what? We'll truck through this and talk about what is arguably huge news for the gaming industry, and has, if they all end up being true, which they definitely seem to be, has big ramifications for how things are going to look moving forward. So the gaming community is buzzing with the news that Microsoft is planning to bring some of its Xbox exclusive games to PlayStation. Not necessarily new news. We've heard these reports, but this move is seen as a significant shift in Microsoft's strategy, reflecting the evolving dynamics of the gaming industry where cross-platform compatibility and collaboration are increasingly valued. Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, has addressed these rumors and confirmed that Microsoft will be hosting a business event next week to shed more light on their plans for the future of Xbox.
Can we pause there?
We can pause there. I was going to pause there already, so that's good.
Perfect.
Because I want to clarify something, and then I think we need to talk about it a bit. Yeah. First and foremost, this was not even in an official capacity with some journalistic anything. This was on X. Mm-hmm. This was a tweet.
Yeah.
After days of silence of Xbox people, big fans, reaching out and being back.
Months of silence, because Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves have been rumored for months, and they have not denied shit about that.
Now, here's the big interesting part, though, and this is before we get into the rest of that. You're right, but those are ultimately two games that make more sense to make the jump. The interesting part here is that if you look at what these rumors are actually stating, it's almost everything. It's Indiana Jones. It is Starfield. It is fucking I don't think Avowed is on the list. It might have been, but I saw the last game that Obsidian put out, Pentiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you keep going down the list, and a healthy Gears of War, a healthy selection of their exclusive properties, if the reports are true, I gotta be honest with you, Phil Spencer saying what he said definitely seems to indicate that they are.
Mm-hmm.
But now I want to go a little bit further back, because what we didn't do in here, we said it was a tweet, but I actually want to quote the tweet, and I'm sure I could find it. But I'll tell you this much. The gist of it, and probably almost verbatim, was, we hear you, we're listening, we were planning a business meeting, or, we've been doing business meetings or whatever. Go ahead. Yeah.
We're listening and we hear you. We've been planning a business update event. Confirmation. That is, I'm sorry, I'm quoting right now. We've been planning a business update event for next week, where we look forward to sharing more details with you about our vision for the future of Xbox. Stay tuned.
Okay. Now, Chris, of course, I won't talk about this for a second, whatever it is that you have to say, but also want to be able to finish the news, and then we can kind of, we'll parse out as needed. We have some questions here and there. I'm going to try and keep this thing fairly contained, because this is a big event in gaming, at least as far as it is. It's not quite Sega leaving the console market
yet,
but it is about the closest we've ever seen of this type of thing since then. So we'll kind of go on that. Look, I want to start by saying this is a really simple sentence. I don't think that we're going to see Microsoft leave the manufacturing market. I don't even really think anytime soon, nor do I see any changes happening in Game Pass.
No.
So insofar as those things are going, I don't think this is some kind of death event for Xbox in the way that I've seen some people say. What I do think it is, if this is true, is a very clear indication and an admittance that they have lost what they even viewed as a battle. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. They have lost, and they see more value now in keeping the ecosystem that they've had for a long time, keeping with the Game Pass business model, so that they still have their platforms that Game Pass is available on being the most competitive versions of it, but realizing that eventually the competition is too large to ignore the potential sales. We've been saying this for a long time, but it definitely seems like a shift has happened here. So, Chris, I'm going to give you the stage for a second. Why did you want me to pause here? And is it in line with anything we've already talked about?
Oh, I just wanted to pause there because I wanted to say two things. The fact that they waited so long, when Phil and Aaron Greenberg have both gone on Twitter to shoot down rumors, to me was just pure confirmation that this was all true. Yeah. The other reason I wanted to stop after talking about Phil's tweet is because I saw something interesting from Tom Warren, and Tom Warren had a lot of this. I think he was the one who reported Indiana Jones. Xbox era had Starfield, and then smattering of everywhere else. But Tom Warren says, I think this is on Reset Era. I don't know what forum he's on, but he said, I want to make it very clear. Most folks in Xbox don't know the full details of what Microsoft will discuss next week.
Interesting. So it's coming now. I actually hadn't seen that. Mm-hmm. So the wording here, and definitely look, this is my internal conversation I had with this anyway. Blake and I were kind of talking back and forth on Discord, as well as a few other people. And we were kind of talking about where the state of this is and what it really means for Xbox. And I think it's clear that this is Xbox ceding ground because they just feel like they have to. But a lot of it came down. There, Blake was talking about, and I even understand where he's coming from, and I think a lot of people share this, that Xbox's woes that have continued throughout last generation and then this current one are still strongly off the back of a lot of really bad moves that happened under Don Mattrick's leadership. And I can see that. I can see why it's easy to think that, and it might even be true. But what I thought was really interesting, and where I was kind of going whenever we were having that discussion, is we have seen. Let me preface this with, I don't think Phil Spencer's bad leadership is exactly what I said on Discord, but it's really hard for the average person who just gets to outside look in, to not think that there's probably a way that Microsoft could have turned this around more successfully. And it's not at least immediately obvious outside looking in that Phil Spencer is the best person for that role leadership wise, even if he's likable and has done a lot of good things for the brand. And the reason I bring that up is Xbox, of course, doesn't have quite as much history and cachet in the same way that Nintendo and even lesser so PlayStation does. But my go-to example was, we were talking about how 360 was a massively successful move forward for Xbox, and then Xbox One immediately stepped back. And you can look at that and go, that probably was because of some of Don Mattrick's things. But what I kept trying to think of, or what I kept thinking of and kind of going through, was Nintendo had their worst performing console ever with the Wii U. And the 3DS was also not the smash success that most of their handhelds were. It only sold around 65 million units. That's less than PS3 and 360 sold, when the Game Boy Advance outsold PS3 and 360, the DS outsold 360 and PS3. So when you keep looking at how those things go, you would look and think, okay, well, if they had that big of a failure, then the next generation probably would have still suffered from that. But instead, we saw the Switch completely turn around Nintendo's luck in the console space and really push forward and create a console that outsold the PlayStation 4, which is a massively selling console, and of course the Xbox One. And it seems like it's going to continue. There's a chance that PS5 doesn't surpass it. Who knows? But where I'm going with that is, we've seen companies turn around from really rough things. PS3 was in a really rough spot, and a lot of it was off the back of Ken Kutaragi being eccentric and deciding what he thought was a good idea. And maybe some of them were good ideas, but it led to a lot of having to crawl and scrape back into a position of looking good, and then get hit again with the PlayStation Network outage and hack, and then still be able to claw your way back up from that. And what I mean from that is, the right leadership, I still think, could have completely undone every bit of impact that happened from Don Mattrick. That's just, I think, the reality. And when we were talking about this, I mentioned something that Chris and I have mentioned a lot, which is this idea of Phil Spencer's very selective corporate speak whenever he talks, and these ideas of, I want as many players as possible to play our games on any system they want, and all these different things. And how is it very easy for someone who's a little bit more in the know to go, that's just business talk, and he's really just saying anything with Xbox on it. Yeah, sure. That's really what he meant. But it's not hard to extrapolate from that. Okay, well, if I'm supposed to be able to play this on everything I want, then why are you taking games that would have otherwise been on my system away from me? And it's a good question. And we talked about it often with something like Starfield and even other games that were set to come to us, like even Redfall, which, not that necessarily Redfall is a shining example of a great game that we missed out on. But the point being is that is what that conversation was. And what I think is happening here, I think it was pretty obvious. So going back to your thing about Microsoft, right? And this being Microsoft saying, my immediate thought here was, there's no way this is Spencer changing his decision. This is Microsoft pushing over him. At the very least, I thought, if it is Microsoft also pushing over him, there's a chance that we see him either gone, or it's interesting that we haven't seen him gone yet. I don't know what's going to happen there, but there's a lot of people thinking that Spencer is going to eventually probably part ways with Xbox, and soon.
Oh, 100%. If this is what happens, I'm 100% positive this is not Phil Spencer's decision. There's no way.
Oh, I think so as well. Yeah. But I do think it's funny that it retroactively makes all those double talk statements true.
Yeah. It's like we've said on this show from the beginning, like, he's doing a great job, but he is a corporate liar, and that's his job. That's not an insult. But clearly, like we talked about and joked about it, when everyone plays, we all win. Well, we're gonna fucking see that come true, aren't we? And who knows, maybe he was seeding it right there. And you know what I mean? I saw a funny tweet where it's like, his initials are PS. He's been telling you for 60 years.
That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my thing is that you're right. To some degree, the job of a businessman is to spin, right? So do what you can to try and make things look better than they may be, even when they're bad. But what I thought was really interesting is that a lot of people would point towards Jim Ryan and be like, Jim Ryan's a cold-blooded businessman. And I think me and you have often said, like, yeah, he is. Like, he was just whatever he needed to do for his brand to do better. That's what they're paying him to do. But one of the things I can at least respect about Jim Ryan is I don't ever feel like he tried hiding that. I felt like very much along the way he was like, no, I work for Sony and PlayStation is our brand and I've got to do what I've got to do to make sure that PlayStation is the place where you want to play. Deal with it. And I guess what I'm saying is that kind of asshole-ish? Yes. Mm-hmm. Does it run the risk of looking a little bit arrogant? Also, yes. But it shows a sense of strength and it's straightforward. It just is, in a way that Phil Spencer trying to act like he wants people to play everywhere while also clearly trying to tell you that I really only mean on Xbox consoles and anything that will let me have Game Pass on it. I just think, you know, doublespeak can just get annoying and tiresome because it always feels like they're burying the lead. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I really just enjoyed the blunt nature of it. Were we supposed to see it? Probably not, but I really genuinely can respect the email from Jim Ryan saying, I don't want Call of Duty. I want him to not get Activision. And that at least he's being blunt. Now, you know, we probably wouldn't have got it quite that blunt if he actually came out and said it. But I think Sony on multiple occasions said they don't think the Activision joining Xbox was a good thing. So, I mean, they were pretty clear about what they thought of it. Let me read a little bit. Go ahead.
Can I quickly, because you brought it up? I think the single worst thing about this is we wasted so much fucking time talking about that merger for it to end up mattering not at all.
Yeah.
Like, if this is true, it all just stays status quo. So who gives a shit?
Well, the Activision part stays status quo. I'll give you that. Or at least from everything we see, we're extrapolating that it would stay status quo. To be fair to what's happening right now, games like Avowed are not currently on that list. And so there is still very likely a chance that there will be games that Microsoft still sees value of being truly exclusive. And I also have a slightly different take on this too, or a different viewpoint of this. I think it's really easy to look at this and think, okay, well, we're getting all these games, therefore it means we're probably going to get day and date for games too. I don't think that's what's happening. I am fairly positive that what they're moving to is what PlayStation moved to with PC. And the fact that it's just, hey, we will come out on Xbox, PC, and Game Pass. Once we've saturated all the consumers that we can within that market and we've pretty much gotten all the sales that we're really going to be able to eke out in a reasonable amount of time, then we'll push it over into PlayStation and pick up more sales that we otherwise didn't have access to, which is exactly what PlayStation's doing with PC. I don't think that this is something where we're going to see Starfield 2 hit day and date, Avowed hit day and date. You know what I mean? That's not what's happening, in my opinion. I could be wrong. We'll definitely know more when this meeting comes, but that's kind of where I see. Speaking of the meeting, one thing I thought was really interesting about the wording is this. It looks like he's trying to
say it without saying it, because that's how it feels like, to me.
I mean, yes, but also it feels like he's trying to allude to the fact that this is something they've been working on and we're always going to do, and it just broke a little early, and now we've been planning it for next week, so we're just going to keep it there and we'll get to it there and then. Whereas this really feels like we weren't ready for this to come out yet, but it's out, and now we have to damage control.
Well, here, something interesting that just got brought back. I don't know if you know the podcast Defining Duke. It's a LSM Xbox show.
Is it the one that's got ACG?
It used to. It has Lord Cognito and Maddie Plays. It's
okay. Yeah, I've never actually listened to it, but I knew it existed.
It's a fine podcast. But he said something that's been making the rounds recently again. He said that when Xbox was getting ready to announce that they were moving to $70 games, and apparently they did it with Redfall 2, they reached out to influencers like Cog, like Maddie, and were like, hey, prepare people for blowback. So you almost wonder if it was planned. They started leaking this stuff as less of a leak and more of a, this is happening, get ready and tell your people. And then it went way more sour than it was supposed to. Because I don't want to be too aggressive about what I'm about to say, but like Imran Khan, I think, tweeted it perfectly, where he was like, when your executives cozy up to toxic fanboys and then get insane blowback when you do something they don't like, this is what happens. And I think that was the problem, right? Is there's an audience cultivated on Twitter, which you've seen. Like, everyone has seen what's happened the last few days on Twitter with, you know, people throwing their Xboxes away and straight up quitting social media because Xbox is no longer only on Xbox.
What's real crazy about that? Let's take a second.
Yeah,
that's all off of currently unconfirmed rumors.
And look, I'm not immune to this because I actually sold my Xbox today.
Yeah, but here's the difference. You're someone who very, very seldom plays their Xbox.
Right.
You already didn't use it very often. Mm-hmm. These rumors seem pretty close to true, and you didn't do any of this until you saw Phil Spencer basically confirm it.
Yeah.
But the difference is you're not giving up something that is apparently part of your identity. It's very easy for us to let go of an Xbox because it's just like, whatever.
Yeah. And,
you know what I mean?
And I made $1 profit. So it works out perfectly. Woo. Stonks.
Yeah. So, and look, I want to be just straight up here. That same level of toxic fan that would do the same thing if PlayStation announced this exists on Twitter. So we're not saying that this is somehow exclusive to Microsoft, the one exclusive they have left.
I did,
but
we moved past this. You know what? We'll just finish the news, and then I want to say something about the Don Mattrick thing you brought up, because it's an angle nobody talks about.
All right. Well, the rest of the news piece then, this event is eagerly anticipated as it will provide more clarity on which Xbox titles will be making their way to PlayStation and possibly Nintendo consoles. Among the rumored titles to be released on PlayStation are high-profile games like Starfield, Indiana Jones, and possibly long-standing exclusives like Gears of War and Halo. The speculation around these moves suggests Microsoft's intention to expand the reach of its gaming ecosystem and to tap into the large player base of the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. The strategy might involve releasing some of their titles on PlayStation while keeping others exclusive to Xbox and PC. This approach could potentially lead to increased player engagement across platforms and open up a world of possibility for gamers who own both consoles. Furthermore, it's believed that Microsoft's decision to bring Xbox games to PlayStation could be influenced by its acquisition of Activision Blizzard, as well as its desire to establish better relations between the two gaming giants. This shift towards a more inclusive gaming environment is not only exciting for gamers, but also indicative of the changing landscape in the gaming industry, where exclusivity is becoming less of a focus in favor of broader accessibility and cross-platform play. It's important to note that these are currently based on rumors and reports, with official confirmation expected in the upcoming event by Microsoft. Gamers and industry observers alike are eagerly awaiting for more details to emerge from this event, which could have significant implications for the future of gaming. So, there we are. That is the rest of that news, and we kind of already started to sum some of that up, but let's dig a little deeper into some of the aspects and what we think is happening, and let's be reasonable to a degree about what we're really looking at here. I think I've already kind of started that. This is not the death of Xbox in the way that people view it being as a actual death, but what I would say is this is a death of Xbox. If true, there is a version of Xbox that is dying here. That doesn't mean the platform's dying, and I think that's a very important difference. But I think the idea of Xbox as a strong voice in the industry that is acting as a more stubborn and rigid competition to its competitors, I think that's kind of gone. And that's not inherently good or inherently bad necessarily. There are implications to which you can view being good and bad. I think there's a lot of people that can view this as still seeding enough ground that it could lead Sony to make even crazier decisions when they don't view that there's as strong a competition. Hard to say, but I mean, I think Chris and I can both easily say and agree that less competition is always worse for the industry. That tends to be the case, and we've known that. But I don't think it's immediately obvious how this would impact Sony's decision-making process. What do you think here, Chris?
Well, I think in terms of that one, I think there's, and me and Blake got into it a little bit, and I stick by my opinion. I think there's a whole lot of really dumb fear-mongering going on with that. Like, I saw Paris tweet, like, oh, if this happens, we're going to get $100 games and $1,000 consoles. I'm like, are you fucking stupid? Like, that doesn't even make business sense. You know what I mean? That there's no business sense to $1,000 console. Who's buying that? Right? Brett, can you afford $1,000? I guess I shouldn't word it that way. Would you buy $1,000 PlayStation console?
And if we're being honest, in an event where it's the only console I have access to, and since I don't tend to prefer playing on PC, there's a high chance that I would. But clearly, to reference what you were saying a second ago, that's also because I have the disposable income to do it, even if I would be inconvenienced and kind of annoyed at that. You get where I'm coming from?
It's one of those things where that they'd have to justify that, right? Like, because let's say the PS Pro comes out tomorrow and it's like, we've got a 4090 in it, the equivalent. It's literally top of the line. It's $1,000. That's worth $1,000. So there is, of course, levels to that. But if the current PS5
and in that setup, it still leaves a $400 system or $450, whatever the digital is now. But something to kind of back up and buoy your point a little bit more. And I get where he's coming from, and they are slightly different consoles with slightly different audiences, or actually pretty different audiences. But even if Xbox were to leave the manufacturing thing, which again, I don't think is happening. And I think as long as Xbox is manufacturing a console and putting one out, then pricing is always still going to be based around what the competition is doing. Because if Xbox is still putting things out, Sony can't suddenly be like, well, we're going to be $1,000, because if Xbox goes out, well, we're only going to be $700, then Sony runs the risk of turning the tide back in favor of Microsoft. I mean, we actually saw that happen in the PS3 gen. That was part of what happened. Xbox was $300 to $400 depending on what model you wanted, and PlayStation was $499 to $600 depending on what model you wanted. And the $499 model was pretty damn rough. Like, it was 20 gigabytes and had no Wi-Fi. So, when you look at that kind of gap between things, I think it goes to show that you still can't be crazy, because people will just move to the one that's more accessible and easier, affordable. But also, Nintendo still exists. And regardless of whether the same games are happening on both platforms, you still are going to have to deal with the fact that if Nintendo's putting out a console that you can play games that you enjoy on for $400 and Sony's still doing $1,000, it's just not going to work. I mean, no. They do balance each other. And unless PlayStation literally becomes the only console manufacturer left, I just don't see those fears being genuinely true. Now, are there some other decisions that could be made? Certainly, but I don't think we'll know those in any time soon.
And I said it, I think me and Josh Ayers had this conversation on Twitter, and I said the worst I could see is $10 more for PS Plus. Like, small things like that are anti-consumer but don't actively fuck the business, right? 4xing the cost of the console would effectively ruin PlayStation, because you have 100 million players right now who can afford $500, but the $500 is a lot, but that's what we've grown to accept. I don't think anyone's growing to accept $1,000 console. I'll tell you right now, if I have to pay $1,000 for a console, I will not play on PlayStation anymore, because I will not be able to afford it without knowing my next four months are much more stressful, and it's not worth it when I could just buy a Steam Deck or buy a Switch. And I think the big thing, and this, one of the things that I said, Blake said to me, he was like, well, he posted a picture of the PS3 original price. And to me, I was like, yeah. And then guess what happened? The PS3 didn't sell, and they dropped the price to $100.
Quickly.
Yeah. extremely quickly. So
yeah, completely changed production. I mean, that's kind of what I mean. You're doing a great job of backing my point. I mean, we've seen the industry speak before. Is it worse now because digital games kind of entrench you further into an ecosystem? Absolutely. But I think to some degree, people, let me take a step back. For being super honest, is it nice that I have all the PS4 games I bought digitally? Sure. I don't actually own them, so that doesn't really matter. But secondarily, for being super honest with ourselves, I'm never going to play 70% of those again.
Nope.
Probably more than 70. I'm actually probably being quite generous and letting it be 30%. But let's just say that it is 30%, right? Let's say that it is. If a console comes out, or if the competition or whatever it be, if my system that I have those games on comes out and says, yeah, for no reason and no gradual increase that happened over time, like with cell phones and the abilities of what cell phones can do, raise and all of this, if for no other reason than that we don't have a competitor, we're going to put our console out and it's going to be $1,000, I would be like, is me losing access to 4 games I may want to play again that bad when I could just rebuy those if I ever decide to really replay them again on the opposing console that I'm about to buy that's $600? No, it's not that bad. I'll just do that. If we're really being honest, like, do I want to do that? No, of course. I love PlayStation. I love the games I've played in my trophy collection and my trophy levels and all those things. But at the end of the day, eventually you can break any camel's back. That's just what you're doing. It's like we're all just little camels for our game system of choice. And if you keep pushing, you put more and more weight on us, we fucking break and we'll go elsewhere. And that's just what happens. So I think I agree with you. That's an overblown thing to be worried about. But I want to get back before we could potentially miss it. You mentioned that you wanted to talk a little bit about an angle of Don Mattrick that you don't feel like much people are talking about. So, the floor is yours. Let's hear it.
The angle of Don Mattrick. Don Mattrick is the reason the Xbox One failed. But what people forget is that Xbox to be specific, at the end of a generation, when the basketball game is done, has never beaten PlayStation. Never. PS3 outsold 360. PS4 outsold 1. We know what's happening now.
Yeah, and that's strictly sales, but your point stands.
That's the thing. They have never sold more consoles than PlayStation. They have always been losing. Yes, as I've said, and as Phil copied me, they lost the most important generation. But it's their decisions that got them here, right? If we had been in the PS3 era, or maybe better is the SNES to NES jump, right, where there was no backwards compatibility, we would be starting with a fresh slate every year. So the console war, quote unquote, would be a real conversation, because who has the better console? I've got to choose my next gen console. Okay, I'm going to go with Xbox because it's the better console. Because Xbox pushed backwards compatibility, better for gamers, better for me, not unhappy about that decision. But once they did that and then lost the generation where people were building their library, it was over.
It was a high risk, potentially high reward. Like it was a ballsy move, because I understand it. It's the type of move that might sway the competition, sway people back into your favor.
Yeah.
Right? Suddenly they feel like a section of their last generation games that they thought they would never be able to play again are going to be playable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That might be the catalyst to move enough people back to your favor that if you can at least get close, and even if it's almost tie, you'll probably be fine.
Right.
But if it doesn't work and you make this push, you are dealing with the consequences of your own action.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a rough spot to be in, because I'm generally a fan of, I like high risk ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they did it. and it benefited us in the long run. So even, whatever you want to call this, I think it'd be foolish for anyone to say that they don't have Xbox to thank for something they enjoy about their current system.
Xbox last generation as a PlayStation podcaster, I want to be very sure to say this. Xbox improved the video game landscape for everyone by putting pressure on Sony to do things. Backwards compatibility pushed by Xbox made the industry better. Crossplay, as little as I see a real super big need for it, crossplay makes the industry better. Hell, investing in bringing back old games is making the industry better. Sony started streaming, but Xbox really showing what you could do with streaming tech made the industry better. Xbox is responsible for a lot of the good things that are happening in this industry. Fucking trophies we wouldn't have those without Xbox. So they've done a lot of stuff that is making the games industry better. The problem is they just didn't sell consoles. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And
that's why it's a crazy gambit, but what a fucking gambit to take. I mean, when you're at that point, to go to the Don Mattrick angle, when you're at that point, it's not that it's a sensible thing to do. It's a sensible thing to go, hey, we could fuck it up and really just cement ourselves in third place here.
And look,
but
the craziest part is that Don Mattrick's Xbox One is the Xbox Series X.
Yeah. That's what's even worse. I mean, is it exactly? No, but is it a whole lot closer? Yes.
It's your entertainment hub. You know?
It is. It is.
I don't do it because I don't want to waste the megabytes, but
yeah, but you can still play disc.
Amazon.
There's still not DRM checks. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot closer. It's a hell of a lot closer.
So let me rephrase. The Xbox Series S is the Don Mattrick console.
Yeah,
including being extremely
Game Pass
underpowered.
is the DRM, because if you never buy the game, you have to make sure you're checking in order to keep access to it. So it still solves the problem of used games, which is what they were trying to do to begin with.
Right.
So yeah, when you look at that, I want to say something about Microsoft as a whole. I have liked a whole lot of Microsoft's products that have had great ideas that the rest of the industry took and ran with, and then they bowed out. And that sucks. They've done it time and again. As much as I loathe some of the aspects of Spotify and how it works towards paying artists fairly for their work, which I don't completely feel like is happening, different conversation. But point being, the first ever music subscription service that really functioned in a relatively similar way to Spotify was Zune Music Pass. And guess where the Zune's at? In the grave.
In the grave.
So look, Microsoft has a long history, and so does Google. A lot of companies have a long history of moving industries forward and not being respected for it. The first online console ever with everything playable online was a Sega Dreamcast. Where the fuck is Sega in the gaming industry now? They're not even making hardware anymore.
But they are making the best JRPGs of all time.
There you go. But, what I kind of mean by that is, and we've seen it happen on Sony's side. Sony has done a lot of really ballsy, weird moves that have ended up being copied in the industry better than Sony ever did it. And that's unfortunate, but that's just how it works. I mean, the cycle of gaming is that we all tend to benefit. And this is where the competition thing really does come in. And I guess the downside here, if we're going to be honest for just a second, the downside, we've been being honest the whole time, but we're going to really focus in. The downside to Xbox finally truly seeding the ground and saying we're going to put most of our games on your console and this version of what we view consoles to be is that there is a chance, I don't know exactly how small or exactly how big, but there is a chance that we don't see that type of high risk, high reward type move happen nearly as often in the industry as we once did, unless someone new tries coming in. And I don't know how likely that is in this era. The only way I could really see that is if a company like Tencent with a lot of capital came in and started buying a bunch of IP and a bunch of things to essentially build themselves up a bevy of exclusives, and then also put out a very well performing console. But I don't know how you do that in a market that's entrenched in backwards compatibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we could see, and kind of what I think really the future is, if Microsoft truly does bow out. First off, I think Microsoft bowing out of the console game is bad to a degree, but I still think them being the single biggest publisher to ever exist would be a big way for them to be like, we're not making our games $70, $80. We're not making our games $100. If you do that, we're taking our games. We're just going to put them on PC. Like, they could very easily strong arm. They can't. They don't have as much leverage. Not pretending they do, but they don't have as much. But here's the thing, right? Like, Blake said it to me in the conversation we had, where he was like, this is how capitalism goes. They're trying to make money, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, sure. What also happens with capitalism is that if Sony leaves an opening, somebody is going to fill it. And it does not take me being a rocket scientist to see the marketing pitch from Valve, a private company. We're fighting the corporation. Here's your box, $4.99. Game Pass.
It's possible. Though one thing I think it's worth noting is I would see Valve doing it in a more traditional way right now when the technology is not quite there. But I thought it was really telling that Google, a company who's known for, much like Microsoft, trying and dumping all the resources they have into a new project and bursting into a new market just to bow out the moment that things start going bad for them. Microsoft tends to try a little harder, a little longer, but both of them have a sea of dead projects behind them where they tried breaking into a market and it just didn't work. But I think it's pretty telling that Google, a company with a whole lot of resources, very similar to Microsoft, did not see any real way forward with the market. And now they handicapped themselves a lot. But the fact that they didn't push forward because of a lot of the things we've been talking about here, they didn't already have games. They didn't have an immediate way to make games playable on their service. You had to port games to it. So people who wanted to play, people who are more patient gamers who may be interested in the service but can't play 2022's Elden Ring because, Elden Ring doesn't exist yet on our platform because we have to port it over. Things like that really slow them down. And I think the more entrenched in what that we get into these things, it's just harder to shift. I mean, you see it in phones with, Android versus Apple. And you also see a lot of the same things we're seeing happening in the console space happening there. I mean, some people may not know this, but Apple's had iMessage for forever. And at the end of 2025, or by the end of 2025, they intend to have iMessage fully compatible with RCS on Android and any other type of phone, so that it is completely interchangeable and you don't see the different colored text boxes. Every type of interaction that goes across, like liking someone's message, just happens as it should, instead of sending a text back that says this person liked your message. So so what I think is really interesting about that is that it goes to show that all industries that we interact with at a really high end level are homogenizing. They're moving closer and closer and closer. And, one thing I think is worth saying is if Microsoft were to leave the console manufacturing thing anytime soon, it would be unfortunate, yes, but I also think that they would just be the first of what will eventually happen to everyone, because eventually the market, if it can, is going to move away from consoles anyway. And it's just going to be about what is your service, what can it offer, how entrenched are you already in it. And the moment that they take away physical devices needing to be the one for that, and they can instead come up with a homogeneous device, the market changes entirely. They may fight like hell to keep that from ever happening, because it will be its own version of a detriment to competition. It'll shift the grounds in which the competition will be fought on. I hope it never happens. There's so many benefits to local hardware that I hope that even any manufacturer that moves into having cloud gaming and everything still sees the value, even if it means that you pay a slight premium for it because they can't produce as many. If in the future PlayStation 6 is, hey, all of our games are playable on the cloud, but also if you really want to play them locally in your home, $800 for a console. Then you go, well, that's an $800 console. But yes, it's an $800 console that is saying you can play games for much cheaper without it. But if you want the premium experience with no lag, no delay, and a much more stable experience, you can buy this box. And I would love for that to be the natural evolution. But who knows?
That is dystopian. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more there is to go into, honestly. For me, like we could do the meme and like, which game are you excited for? You know, but I think the thing is like, it's an industry shift and it's fascinating to see what happens. And Brett, what game are you excited for?
Look, let's take a second to go into some of the questions we got.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them are, of course, about this. It's not surprising at all to see. So we have over on... dang, did I close the Twitter? I think I did. We have a couple of questions that I want to get to, and I want to make sure that we're kind of doing them in the order that makes the most sense. Let's get the meme question out of the way. And this is, will this podcast become the Triangle X podcast? Get it? Because the square button is X on the Xbox controller. Yuck.
Yuck. I don't think
and
so.
It's got Goofy, and he's going, yuck. Well, geez, Phil.
You know, I was just thinking about it. You know what would be the biggest troll? If you got this, right, and all these games come over, but you can't earn trophies, you can only earn achievements.
That'd be quite funny. All right. So now we go to exactly what you were talking about. So one of the questions came from Philip Hoy, who you may know if you listen to his PlayStation podcast. So he's over on Twitter at Philip Hoy with one L. And he is one of the co-hosts of NPS We Trust. Hopefully one day our schedules will align across the universe, you know, across this planet, for it to not be like dead ass of the night while they're doing a podcast, because they've invited me on and I would love to go on. But yeah, go check them out. NPS We Trust. I think they're bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks you get a podcast. With that in mind, he says, if the rumors turn out to be true or are to be believed, what is your top 3 games from Xbox that you're looking forward to playing on PlayStation? And do you think things will be different, e.g. haptics, adaptive triggers, cards, trophies, and etc.? That's actually a little bit more in-depth version of that, because it is interesting to think about how some of PlayStation 5's quality of life features may or may not be implemented into this. So, Chris, in thinking about how controller action may change, how cards, how trophies will be interacted, what 3 games would you like to see come over?
State of
Dream
Decay
of Dreams
2.
here. Yep. State of Decay.
I mean, Dream of Dreams, Day and Date, State of Decay 3. But State of Decay 2 for sure. I would, me and Sean were actually kind of hyped to do the legendary co-op in Halo MCC together.
Hell yeah.
So I would love to do that. Look, at the risk of, sounding crazy, most of the games, man, like, yeah, I don't play on Xbox, but like, I think I've said it before on this show, like, I don't play on Xbox because I like earning trophies. It's not because I don't like those games. Because if you've listened to this podcast, I'm not like the biggest PlayStation exclusive guy.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like I want to play Gears. I want to see if Starfield sticks with me when I have the carrot of here's a platinum, right? I want to see that kind of stuff. So the reality is, like, a lot of these, like, I'll fucking play Pentiment. That game looks cool, and what I played was fun, but I was not going to read for 20 hours unless I got a platinum at the end. So,
which, look, let's be honest. That's I get where you're coming from, and I know what you're saying, but at the same time, it's like you're moving past the quality of the games and more what the console's ecosystem is doing to boost the game for you. And
Brett,
reality of even
Brett, You just played Fast and the Furious Shifter.
Dude, I was literally about to say.
Okay. I was literally about to say
that carrot on the stick does happen. But what I'm kind of getting at is it doesn't necessarily mean the games are good if the reason that you're playing is there. Look, because I'll say this. To tie into what you're saying and to be a little bit more specific with what I want, I would like to see Avowed come over. I think it's the type of game that PlayStation has been missing. And with Bethesda being gone, those types of games are going to be even fewer and far between. Or let me take a step back. With Bethesda and Obsidian gone, those types of games are going to be few and far between on PlayStation without something like this happening. So I'm going to say Avowed. If we're dreaming of dreams, Day and Date, Outer Worlds 2.
Oh, good call.
Yeah, Outer Worlds 2 is a big one. And then there's look, if we're going towards, I don't know how I feel about this game yet, so I'm gonna kind of put it 2 games. Fable, if the reboot is actually good, Fable. It's one of my favorite franchises based almost entirely off the back of a single fucking game.
Yeah.
I think Fable 2, it talked about all the time about how good it is, and I think it is an objectively worse game than the first one by almost any metric that there is to be had. I'm not saying I hate the game. I just think it's really interesting that a lot of people seem to like Fable 2 a lot more than I did. And I've tried again. It still just doesn't work for me enough. Point being, if the Fable one doesn't land and I want to go towards something that I know I like, I actually would totally be down to play more Halo Infinite. Yeah, and look, that's true, much like Chris says, that's true right now, but I have enough other stuff going on and not enough friends have Xboxes, and you're trying to play between PC and Xbox, and not that that's impossible, but it's a little more messy than I wish it was. And if I can just play with all my PlayStation friends I already have on a game that I already know I enjoy, I'd be willing to jump back into Halo Infinite. Did I have problems with it? Of course. Did the game have issues making sure that its own built-in game carrot on a stick of battle passes and season passes and extra content was there? Yeah, that was an issue. But I've been away for a long time, and I'm sure I could sink another 100 hours into it without thinking. So that would be a cool game to see. Kind of going into it, I would actually love to play Halo with adaptive triggers, and it will never happen because it couldn't happen on the other systems. But I would love to see a game like Halo really take advantage of the stepped triggers where you can do the thing. Because one of my favorite parts of Ratchet was this idea, and this was in Returnal too, that where your finger was at on the trigger interacted with how the gun actually acted. And I think the idea of being able to light fire by half pulling and then do some kind of heavy fire by full pulling is a cool as shit idea. And also doing the same when you're doing your aim reticule. So you lightly hold L2 and a different reticule comes up for a different purpose. And then if you full hold L2, you get a different reticule. All that to say, also, any shooter game that's got alt fire modes are fucking sick. And because it's also Insomniac and I technically saw it, I would love to see a Resistance game come out on PS5 and get to actually play around with this because they could completely change the way that the alt fires work and they could be a lot more interesting. They were already great, but I think now there's room to do something truly new and unique with it. While not having to necessarily add buttons, right? You're adding steps to your buttons.
Exactly. Cool. I'll give you a more specific answer. It would be State of Decay 2, Halo MCC, Starfield.
Yeah. I've come to peace with the fact that I just don't think I'm interested in Starfield at all. I've struggled with it, but I'm going to go ahead and say if this game comes to PlayStation, I might be more likely to try it. Definitely, because I imagine Chris would buy it and my entry would be free. But it is much like Foam Stars. It is just not a strong urge. I would have to pull myself. I would have to force myself to play it.
Let me ask you
that's not a good starting point.
Because you said something interesting to me. I feel like this is going to sound kind of crazy, but this is how I feel. I feel like I'm going to buy 99% of the games Xbox puts out there strictly to be like, keep doing it. I'm dead serious. Like, I don't give a shit about Hi-Fi Rush, but I will buy it day one. Just be like, I'm not going to play this, but I don't, because what I worry is strong, because I could give a shit less realistically, but I worry this happens and then people go, nah, we really didn't want that shit on PlayStation, so they don't buy it. You know,
here, look, the reality of it is, because I'm gonna be honest, Velvet and I were talking, and he mentioned that there's really not any game that was strong enough to make him buy an Xbox, and that means there's not really a game that was strong enough for him to want to play anyway. He was saying like there might be one or two, and look, that may be true of him. And now I know that there are definitely other fans who only didn't play the games or only convinced themselves that they didn't like them because it was on the opposing system. I'm going to tell you right now. You want to know how I know Sea of Thieves and Halo Infinite are great games? Because I played them in spite of no trophies.
Yep.
I completed a fucking season pass on Sea of Thieves in spite of trophies because I wanted a goddamn pumpkin head costume, and I played the shit out of that game, and I will play it again and get the platinum. That's just an added bonus at that point. But my point being is I tend to really know that Xbox has something when I get so interested in playing it that I play it at the cost of not earning trophies in a game I could be playing on PlayStation. So kind of roping back into your point, I tend to know how I feel. I think Avowed looks awesome, and I would play Avowed even if these games weren't coming to PlayStation because it looks great. I would play Outer Worlds 2 even if it weren't coming to PlayStation because I know it looks great, and I know the first game's great. There's no reason to think the second one wouldn't be. So to that end, if I'm being honest, there are a lot of Xbox games that I'm really just truly not interested in. Do I think they're interesting? Sure, but not me interested in. More that I think it's interesting that game exists and came from a first party aspect in this level of the industry instead of like Nintendo does weird first party stuff all the time, but you don't see that as often from PlayStation and Microsoft. And Microsoft really turned around and started doing a lot of interesting stuff when they started shifting towards Game Pass. And that's probably because the interesting stuff is a lot cheaper and it's a lot quicker and it's an easier way to pad out your service. But I don't care because the end result is interesting.
Exactly. All I have to say, Brett, is Sea of Thieves on Xbox, on PlayStation, bro? Hell yeah. That should have been the cold up.
That actually would have been pretty good. Yeah. That would have been pretty good. All right, so let's go back over into the Discord. We've got a few there that I want to go through. So I'm going to stick with the ones that are a little more involved, or I'm going to stick with the one that's a little more involving what we're talking about before we move completely off of the Xbox thing. But it kind of goes back to something we touched on for a second. But Rude Cold, longtime listener, and longtime patron, says, so how long before Phil Spencer leaves Microsoft? I think this is interesting wording because he is not implying that Microsoft is doing away with him, rather the opposite. And I'm not saying that I think it's that either. Just it's quite obvious now that this wasn't his original vision and it's being forced on him from higher up executives at Microsoft. I can't see him wanting to stay after all this. Thoughts? I guess I'm going to start with asking you a sub question within this, which is what I hinted at a second ago. Do you think Phil Spencer leaving Microsoft, regardless, it'll probably be framed as Phil Spencer deciding to step down? But do you think in this scenario, if Phil Spencer does leave, that it will be because of himself or because of Xbox being like, we tried you, it's not working, we're going a different direction? Or do you think that they also, I guess that's the first question. Do you think he'd leave of his own accord, or do you think he'd be pushed out?
I can only speak as someone who isn't a multimillionaire.
Me too.
Just
same.
Well, let me. This will make sense in a second. I don't like, for me, right? I disagree with my boss's decisions all the time. I still go to work to collect a paycheck, so I do kind of believe Phil's going to leave because he doesn't like the direction. No, he's not.
See, that was going to be my second question was, do you even think he leaves? Because even if he doesn't like what's being handed to him, I'm not even saying it from a check standpoint. He's in a very different league than we are, for being honest. Like, you and I both work the way that we work, which so does he, right? His lifestyle is based around his income, which is based on the job he's chosen. So if he wants to keep that lifestyle, he has to keep a job that can support that lifestyle. Right. Ergo, he may just be going to work.
He's not going to push carts because he's unhappy.
Exactly. Now, the question I think becomes, if he were to leave, he would ostensibly be leaving into a position that was similar. And I think at that point, you have to ask, who wants Phil Spencer? And I've seen an interesting thing. I think you even joked about it a little bit. But in this weird time where we don't have Jim Ryan, what are the weird chances that Sony might be like, Phil Spencer, interesting, grab him up? That's a super hypothetical. I'm not saying it should happen, could happen, would happen. But
I think it should.
It speaks to the fact that if Phil's going to leave, I think he has to leave for something that's similar to what he's already doing in some degree. It has to be a similar scale job, so he's making similar money, most likely, unless he doesn't care to downsize his life, which he may not. So yeah, I think that there's a very clean and easy way to see this happening and Phil Spencer staying. He's a likable face, and if anything, the fact that he's not been pushed out already. And that this didn't come after being announced to being stepped down. If this is coming and they don't say anything then, I think that this is very clearly them understanding that Phil is a likable face. He knows how to talk to the community and he has his uses. And I think that they can just go, we can do that while having a slightly tighter grip on his collar of what he can and can't say and his decision making. Instead, it'll be more filtered through us, but he'll still be the face of the company and get to make certain decisions.
Look, as much as I said it as a joke, I would celebrate the move of Phil Spencer being, head of PlayStation. I think. Can I ask why? Good. Because I think Phil is the perfect mix of gamer and bullshit corporate artist. I really do.
Okay. Well, let me sub ask within that because we got to dig a little deeper into it. I think we both agreed earlier that Phil Spencer, at least for Xbox, was probably not the leadership that they needed to get them out of the bind they found themselves in terms of seeing the actual results. Was he willing to try a lot of high risk things? Absolutely he was. Has he done a lot of good things? Absolutely he has. But what I'm kind of getting at there is if he wasn't really able to fully turn the ship around into a successful joint when we know they can be, because even though you correctly talked about the fact that Xbox has actually never beaten PlayStation in sheer sales numbers, I think that there's a much different conversation to be had that generally speaking, when we think about the majority of the generation and who held the gamers' interest to a majority, Xbox won the 360 PS3 generation, if not by numbers, then by how long they held the market lead. They were the console to go to for the majority of the thing. Yeah. Did PlayStation do insane work to claw themselves back up? You bet your ass they did. But the reality is that there was a reason Call of Duty was exclusive to Xbox for all those years, and that's because they were the system that made more sense to do it on. And PlayStation didn't get it until they spent way more money and eventually built a system that made way more sense to continue being on because the player base.
No, you're right. Like, PlayStation won the Electoral College and Xbox won the popular vote. Like, you're right.
Exactly. So with that in mind, what I'm kind of saying here is I don't know if I think the next person for PlayStation should be someone who, A, wasn't able to get the company completely out of a rough situation, which some of it was beyond him. I will cede that to some degree. But B, if we're to believe that all of the Game Pass and all these different things were on him, I want to be honest, for me, at least for a second, I like Phil as a person, generally speaking. I don't think that I agree with most of what he wants to see happen in the market. So I don't want to see him come to PlayStation and start trying to push PlayStation even further down the line of games day and date on PS Plus and moving very strongly towards subscription services and doing away with physical copies of games, which, to be fair, may not be Phil. That may be that same move may be tied into what's happening from the people above him, but those sensibilities aren't really in line with what I want. So I don't view him as a great fit. That's why I'm really curious as to why you do. Not to say that your opinion doesn't matter, just more so to understand where you're coming from in comparison to me.
I think that a lot of what you say is right. But I think in terms of games, in terms of acquisitions, in terms of, yes, speaking to the people and giving them what they want, And in terms of being innovative, like, yes, he never turned the ship fully around, but he definitely got that ship off the dock.
For sure. I will give you that. Yeah.
And what I am curious about is,
or he at least, it was going, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't turn it around, but he avoided the rock.
Exactly. If Phil Spencer was the captain of the Titanic, I think Jack comes home. And I think that's kind of where I come from it on, is I see what happens with Xbox, and I think Xbox overall, like, this is one of the most interesting things about what's happening here is I think Xbox, hot take on the PlayStation podcast, Xbox has a better first party future than PlayStation does today.
Currently, I agree.
And I do think a lot of that is Phil.
It's quantity alone, if we're just being honest. I mean, it is quality, but it's also quantity alone.
Right.
At some point, having 48 first-party studios inherently makes you.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about Call of Duty and that kind of stuff. Like, PlayStation has nothing to compete with Avowed. They've got nothing to compete with Starfield, Halo. Whether you Halo. But even Starfield, whether you like that game or not, PlayStation doesn't have anything to compete with it.
Yep.
And I think the interesting thing about seeing Phil take the reins over at PlayStation would be, what does he do with the lead? Right? What does he do when he doesn't have to turn the ship? Right? When he doesn't have to avoid the iceberg? And if Phil leaves because he doesn't like the direction, what does a pissed off Phil Spencer do to Microsoft? Right? Does he walk into PlayStation with a "we're gonna fucking kill them" attitude? I mean, it's not a real reality, but does he walk?
Because as far as PlayStation's concerned,
it's already over.
They're effectively dead. They're not dead, as I've mentioned, but the version of Xbox that they've had to fight against is effectively dead. They're no longer fighting on the same battleground for the turf of what console is going to be sitting in your living room, because Xbox is basically saying, yeah, you beat us on that front. So now what we have to do is just say, you beat us on that front, but now we're going to use your machines against you to make more money, which of course they're going to make a bunch of money off of sales they weren't getting, and then PlayStation's going to be like, cool, we're making 30% of that.
Yeah,
that's just
exactly
where it is. But
I don't know. I think you're right, and I think a lot. Look, I'll be honest with you. I think a lot of why I want to see it is it would be very funny.
The drama of it all.
Exactly. That's soap opera shit. It really is. But
sure.
I do think he's a good leader. And I think at the very least, I would like to see him come in and consult.
It could be interesting.
I think he's a guy who they should throw the bag at if he does end up leaving Microsoft, which, to be clear, I don't think he will. But if he does...
Yeah, I'm not so sure he is either. Yeah.
If he does leave, I would think that's a guy who Sony goes, maybe you're not going to be our CEO, but we'll pay you. Come over here, help Herman in his new role, and teach us the way.
really
going.
bearing in on that one.
Oh, I'm fully on board with that.
All right, hear me out for a second. You know how, like, in season 4 or 5 of The Office, that Jim and Michael become co-manager?
Yes.
You might be able to sell me on a Phil Spencer co-manager, because what I will say is Phil does have your one really salient point, in my opinion. PlayStation has an eye for quality, but unfortunately their eye seems very skewed towards a specific type of game here lately when it comes out of first party. Even if that just means that their first party for some reason is oddly skewed towards the same type of game for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But what I do think is true is that Phil Spencer does have a really interesting eye for being able to look at a game and be like, that's something different, that's interesting, that's not really happening on a first party level, let's bring it. And Sony used to have that eye, and I think they lost it, understandably so, by trying to really refine a specific aspect of that eye, and they really found it, and they dialed that in. And those games may not be necessarily the game for you, Chris, and I think that we've acknowledged that long ago, but clearly numbers alone show that most of Sony's games are the right call at the right time, and they do big numbers, and they work, and they outperform anything Xbox has coming out. Unfortunately, Starfield's probably the one. It's a weird example of where I think Starfield probably sold really well, probably outsold a lot of PlayStation exclusives, if we're being honest. But for the most part, most of Microsoft exclusives are not hitting PlayStation exclusives numbers, also because of sheer number of people to buy them, if nothing else.
Circling back to the whole problem.
Yeah, but I think if you kind of, because that would be my thing, is if Sony does start to hit hard times, I don't know that I feel confident that Phil is the person who can make sure they stay afloat in those hard times. I mean, he'd probably be able to make sure they stay afloat, but he may not be the person who can make sure they scrape and crawl back to the top.
Maybe not, but I really think that as much as I low-key defended Don Mattrick, which I didn't do, he was terrible, where Mattrick put them and where they are now,
it's vastly different.
Exactly, and I do think a lot of that is Phil. So I almost think that what you're describing would be the exact scenario where they would want Phil Spencer.
Maybe. I think the best thing I can use here is just a really good example that happens in America and probably any other democratic nation. So this is not politics insofar as this is how hard it is for the general public to understand exactly who is responsible for what change. And what I'm saying is, oftentimes in political discussions, someone will be like, well, this president did this. And then someone will be like, well, that's only because that was based off of the remains that happened because of something that this president started. And you start to kind of go, well, then who the fuck was the one responsible for the thing that I think was good? And that's the really hard part to kind of figure out. I think that Phil's been at it long enough that it's reasonable to say that any good outcome for Microsoft was probably because of his decision making, but we don't fully know that. And the same thing is true of like when we talked about how well Jim Ryan seemed to do for PlayStation. We don't really know how much of that was because of Jim Ryan's actual procedures and choices, or how much of that might have been things that were already set in motion before they got rid of Sean Layden. And so because it's so hard to see that, because it's so hard to really figure that out and quantify that, it's really easy for both sides to be like, it was all bad because of Mattrick and it was only good because of Phil Spencer. But I think it's really easy to also say, maybe it was Phil Spencer, but maybe it was also something that was already happening before Phil Spencer ever really came into boat. Like, it's super hard to say and we'll never know. But at the end of the day, the best thing we can look at is straight results. And regardless of who's responsible for them, what we can say is Microsoft, no matter who, did turn around, or at least Xbox within Microsoft did turn around in comparison to where they were going. Mm-hmm. So it only matters who insofar as if that person can bring that same choice making to the other company. And that's something we'll probably never know, but I imagine a business that has a much more keen eye for what was happening and probably a more keen eye for what did affect what, since they're more involved than us as an average gamer, would have a better idea of whether or not Phil would be a good fit for them.
Yeah. Well, look, in the end, the reality is Herman Holst is taking that job. It's not going to be Phil Spencer. So, like, we can just move past it, I think. Do you have more questions, Brett?
We got one more.
I got a question for you. Couple.
Is yours going to be the ending question, or do you want to go ahead and slot it in?
Doesn't matter to me. I just got a couple gut check questions for you. I'm curious about.
Is it about Microsoft?
Yeah, it's about this.
Then we'll go ahead and do those, because the last question we have comes from Jehudi MD, and it is it's a completely tangential question.
Oh, fuck yeah. Is Sony present next week?
Ooh. I'm sure someone at Sony is beating themselves over the head for not delaying State of Play for this coming week.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Because the general consensus around the State of Play is that it was pretty good. And I think if you were able to be like, on Microsoft's low week, let's really come in and show them all the cool stuff that we're doing. I didn't even
think about it from that angle. I was thinking you were like, if we'd waited a week, we would have had Microsoft on our stage.
Well, that's also potentially true, but I really think you could just use it as a timing to be like, again, if they had been in the know, which arguably they were. But if you really wanted to be a dick, then that's how you do it. You'd go, Microsoft is having a press conference where they're basically admitting defeat and one of the best state of plays that we've ever seen.
Devil's advocate.
Yeah.
They knew this was coming and didn't want to be a dick. Because now
that's what I'm saying. Because now they're working with Microsoft.
Publisher relationship with Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Do you think we start getting like the state of play directors, developer direct to the state of play or whatever they call it?
To be honest, I don't think so. But no. I think that's still based on the fact that everything in my gut from everything that I've seen paints a picture of Microsoft releasing their games on PlayStation later, not day and date. If I am wrong about that, and they are willing to have some of their titles come day and date moving forward, then maybe we do start to see Microsoft show up at these state of play events in a more day and date capacity, like even a reveal capacity. I don't think that they'd go that far because as long as they still have a console, they have a duty to prop that console up.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of decisions, if you're just gut checking me right now, I'm going to say no.
Okay. You got me off a little bit. Okay, phrasing. Didn't mean that. You got me off tangent a little bit because now I'm thinking about a PlayStation showcase where Microsoft announces the sequel to Halo Infinite.
And that's what got you off?
Yeah. I was sitting there like Herman Hulst walks out. I'm so excited to introduce my friend from Microsoft. Yeah. Does Xbox continue to make another console?
Dude, that was the worst German accent, by the way. That was fucking terrible.
I was not even trying to do a German accent. I was just pretending I sounded like Herman Hulst.
And Herman, you were doing like British Herman Hulst.
Yeah, it was much closer to not anyone like that.
Anyway, so, what was your next question?
Does Microsoft make another console?
Currently, yes. Okay. I think so.
So you think there's a next-gen Microsoft console?
The main reason I say that is we're far enough into this generation. We're about halfway through a normal generation. That this is where I'll leave it. That console's in R&D, and as of right now, they don't have enough information to make them stop doing R&D for a next-gen console. That's what I'd say. If in this next 3 years before they start doing this and they start kind of moving towards actually moving to production, if they see less Xboxes coming off the shelves as a result of their games being available elsewhere, then we may see it go. But again, gut checking right now, games aren't coming day and date. They're coming much later. They're hitting a year, maybe 2 years, depending on when they feel like the game is sold through. Then they come to PlayStation. I think they still make a console and they still support it and they still back it that way.
I agree. Because here's the thing. 100% of 20 million players and 70% of 100 million players, still a lot of money.
Ton of money.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I mean. You don't really want to sink your own ship when your own ship gives you much more of the profit share. You still want to buoy that. And that's why I have a really hard time thinking they would day and date for anything that's genuinely internal. Yeah. I can very easily see Blade and Indiana Jones hitting day and date because of a push from Disney.
That's what I said to Blake. I was like, what I think, and this would be my prediction, because this is the next question I'm going to ask you, is what do you think comes out on next week? And what I really think is that Bethesda, Activision, old Xbox titles, think Sea of Thieves, come to PlayStation, but Halo, I'm not willing until I see the box that says PS5 and Halo Master Chief Collection in my hands to predict Halo coming to PS5. I'm just not willing to do it. But
look, I can understand the hesitation. I do.
It's too scary.
But I'm also going to go towards saying I'm going to split Halo for a second.
Yeah.
If
multiplayer
Halo comes to PlayStation, it's just the multiplayer.
I agree.
And that's because they stand to gain from having more players in a game that has microtransactions. Again, they're trying to pump themselves full. They want the majority of money they can get. Phrasing. So if they phrasing, but listen, realistically speaking, it makes far more sense for them to say, okay, we'll move the multiplayer. It keeps there's more people playing. It's still cross-play. It gets more potential buyers into this, and it keeps a healthier online ecosystem. I honestly think that the reason Sea of Thieves is coming up the way that it's going to, I think Rare is about to stop supporting Sea of Thieves. I think it probably has a season or two left in it because the game is quite old at this point. 7 years. I think what they're trying to do, introduce it to PlayStation, keep the online community that is there having more people to play with, because I would assume to some degree, by nature of how that game is, it's very repetitive, and I enjoy the game, but it's very repetitive, and it sees players play it in seasons. A good chunk of their online player base for that game has shifted and changed, and eventually enough people are going to play it genuinely for the last time ever that they need to make sure they have an audience to continue to play for those few that may want to try and straggle on. And I think that's smart. I don't think that that's bad at all. All games need to come to an end, including live service games. There will be a sad day when Sea of Thieves is just genuinely no longer playable. Hopefully that's really far out, and instead it just dies a modest death like most multiplayer games, to where you can get on and you can play, but it's not as active as it once was. Mm-hmm. The only way you're going to get that, I think, is if you continue to push it into as many devices as you can. PlayStation makes perfect sense for that, and you may get a couple more hundreds of thousands of dollars from some of the PlayStation whales that have not been able to purchase fucking $37 ships, god damn it. on Sea of I think it's actually lower. I think they're like $40, but they're insane. That's all I'm gonna get at. You will never see me buying a ship. Ever.
You will definitely see me buying a ship.
I know I will. I know who I'm talking to. I am not the whale, Chris. You're the whale in this setup.
Brett, I had a come to Jesus moment because I spent $24.99.
Phrasing, Chris.
I didn't say come on, Jesus. I spent $24.99 on a Tekken 7 character pack.
You fucking...
And I hit confirm and went, why? Like, that's 100% the course of events.
Chris, I don't think any action has ever summed you up so perfectly. That is genuinely amazing. That is the most you thing I have ever heard. Holy shit.
The worst part about the whole thing is
How close was it to you having the platinum?
Same night. The worst part about
you will never use those.
No, I deleted the game already. There was absolutely no reason to do it. The worst part was I wanted to play with one specific DLC character. And guess where this story goes? She wasn't in the fucking DLC pack, so I didn't even get to play the character I wanted to play.
Oh, Chris, you just made my whole night better. This is a stupid thing to say. That may be the funniest story I've heard in weeks. That is so fucking funny. My cheeks hurt.
I'm glad I did it for the content, man. Because that was not worth it for Tekken. All I got out of it was some dude named Gary and Noctis. And I didn't want either of them.
Chris, let me pull back the curtain before we go to Jehudie's thing. Earlier when I got home, I don't have a long gap from between I get home and from work and when we start recording. So I thought I'm probably going to sit there and watch Batman Beyond my wife a little bit before the show. But real quick, as soon as I got home, I turned on my PlayStation because I wanted to look. I did a little bit last night. I wanted to look for games that I might do for 200, right?
Uh-huh.
And I went to your account because I was like, Chris has a lot that maybe would interest me. And I remembered that you sent me a picture for that Father Forgive Me
Sick
game. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
But it's like, so what I thought was really interesting is I was going through and not even the third row down, I see that you bought that fucking Darklight game that I thought looked cool. And you're like, yeah, it looks kind of cool. It looks like your type of game. And now you own it. And I imagine that you're never going to play it.
No, I played it. I'm in the middle of it. I just did not far enough to talk about it, but I wanted to play it too. But I was just good.
Because I was a little worried that I was like, Chris, God damn it. I told you I was probably going to buy that game, and you didn't even give me the opportunity. Here you have it.
You did not say that. Otherwise, I would not have bought it. You were just like, yeah, it looks cool.
Well,
it doesn't matter either way.
I didn't say the exact words, but I think I implied that I was interested enough to buy it. Let me say that.
I was just like, I wanted to play it, so I did it.
Also, Chris, did you buy Strangers of Paradise?
Yeah. Yeah,
I already owned it, Chris. I bought it for you.
Then no. Then I downloaded it through Plus.
Okay. I saw it in your list. It didn't say Plus beside it. It said purchased. I swear.
I don't remember buying it.
And Chris, I bought that game for you specifically because you said you thought you were interested in it. This was like a month after it came out. And I said, I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I will go ahead and buy it for you because you'd been buying a lot of games in that period. And I said, I'll buy. And I messaged you and said I bought it. And you said, dope. I don't think you ever played it. Or maybe you played very little.
I started it, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember buying it, but who the fuck knows?
Yeah. What I'm getting at, Chris, is that you're the Moby Dick of the game industry.
Yeah, and I readily admit that. Now
you're the Puerto Rican whale.
Sorry. It's fine. El Wahel. No, look, I can actually tell you how much I spend on Marvel Snap because in Marvel Snap's store, there's a track for you spend this amount of money, you get this much points, you get this. I have maxed out that track. Yeah. That track maxes out at $200. I have done that 3 times. So if anyone's wondering,
Chris, you are La Ballena Blanca. That's you.
Perfecto.
You are the white whale.
Yep.
God damn it. All right, Chris, that was fun. Let's go real quick to our last question of the episode before we wrap this thing up. I knew this was going to be a longer episode. That's why I was a little, when you were like, my head hurts, I was like, shit. This is clearly a very big topic to cover.
I sacrifice for y'all. Don't get mad at me about my Horizon takes. I want to cry right now. It sucks, dude. This 2 hours, 45 minutes in, I'll give a shit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been talking to Sadie about this. I've been in pain for weeks, and I'm 100% sure it's because I quit smoking weed, and it's coming out of my system, and my body just hurts now.
You're just detoxing.
Yeah. If anyone tells you that weed is not addictive, it is addictive because I am having withdrawals, dog. This is sad. I drove to the dispensary 5 times. It was like, I don't want to smoke. And I came home. But I went there.
Oh, man, you're fiending.
Yeah. It's
hey, stay strong, brother. Do what you feel like you got to do for you.
Look, man, I need to lose some weight. I can't do it when I'm smoking weed. I cannot do it when I'm smoking weed. So trying to quit, but everything hurts.
Oh. What's worse is when that just starts to become your de facto with no reason.
Yeah,
everything hurts.
What I'm saying
just
right
old,
now
bro.
Is very possibly cope, but
no. Look, I know other people who it surprised me. You're not the only person I know who's quit smoking, specifically weed, and been like, "Bro, this is rough."
No, yeah.
So I firmly believe, not through experience, but through enough descriptions from other people, I'm pretty sure that you are going through probably more mild withdrawals than a lot of drugs, but a withdrawal nonetheless.
Yeah, it's not going to kill me like a heroin withdrawal, but dude,
it's to go towards the same thing. Like, is caffeine addictive in the way that people mean? No, but is caffeine actually is a substance addictive? Absolutely, it fucking is. If you stop drinking soda cold turkey and you just don't drink tea or anything with caffeine, you will get caffeine headaches from a lack of caffeine.
Exactly. Me and Sadie have talked about it. She's trying not to drink coffee, and she's like, I have to drink coffee because I'm in pain without it. Like,
yeah, that's what a sentence. It sounds so crazy. Like I have zero control of my life if I can't not drink coffee without dying.
Right. And it's funny because as a kid, everyone's like, I'm a grouch without my morning coffee. It's like, no, you're a fucking addict. Go to rehab.
See, that's the thing that's funny to me because people go that they're like, oh, I'm useless in the morning without coffee. And I'm like, I don't drink coffee and I'm fine.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure that we've learned the reason. You are addicted.
Yeah. God bless.
God bless. Okay, we got one more question here. And this one's just interesting. Judy MD says, how worn down is the keyboard you're typing on right now? And which keys are the worst? I'm going to tell you something interesting. I've had the same keyboard at work the entire 10 years that I've been there. It still works. It is older. I got it with the computer. It's a wired Lenovo. Actually, it's a Dell. I'm sorry. It's a wired Dell keyboard, and it is, of course, mechanical. I absolutely love that. And that keyboard looks pristine. No keys are rubbed. No, let me tell you this. Pristine's a little too strong. I'll step back a hair. All the letters are legible. A few of them are slightly starting to show like where the rough texture that they put on them is going through to be a little more shiny. That's it. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure if I were to really look, I typed this in at work, so it's kind of a where are you at? This sounds like such a weird thing to say, but this is just where I'm at. Whenever I was teaching myself how to type when I was very young, right? And whenever I was doing a lot more online play and I wanted to be able to type quicker, I did it so often that sometimes when I sit at the computer right now, the first thing I type as soon as I go to anything is I type Slipknot. I don't know why. Yeah. That's just the word I landed on because it's got a fair bit of travel across the keyboard. And I like Slipknot. So I used to sit there and just see how fast I could get to where I could type Slipknot. And that was how I got more and more familiar with the keyboard to the point where the reason I type fast without the home row keys, mind you, I type faster than anyone I know that types on the home row keys. But I just I'm doing an advanced, I'm aware of where my hands are, even though it's not home row keys. Let me say that much. My hands are never in the home row keys, but I'm always aware of where I'm at. And I can type without looking often, but it's not because of a home row key. So,
yeah.
That's my weird keyboard story.
I was just looking at my MacBook because that's my most used one. And it's like the C key for some reason. I don't know why. It's not even that bad, but it's the only one that has like noticeable on it. But my old
keyboard it's because of how often you type in cuck.
Probably,
yeah.
Because we didn't talk about this in our cuck chair. We have a cuck chair in our survivalist space. We don't talk about Kevin or Chris the cuck chair.
That's true. Look, Chris went to a goblin outpost in this world, stole their chair, carried it back to our house, and set it at the foot of his bed.
Oh God, the cuck chair.
The cuck chair. We have a cuck chair, and Chris's view was that we cucked the goblins out of their chair, and now we're going to use it as a cuck chair. Yeah. So there you have it. Play the Survivalist. Yeah, it's a great game. If you want to play with us, don't hop in randomly like that one user did that we had to kick.
Kick that dude immediately, bro. Get the fuck out of here.
Chris and I were playing, and suddenly it's like something Malice joined, and I was like, I don't like that fucking name.
Wasn't it Mother Malice or something?
Something like that. It's like Mother_Malice.
It was definitely alliterative.
And I'm like, I don't fucking like this. This is a terrible name. This sounds like someone coming to just destroy everything we've worked on. And so Chris quickly and swiftly kicked him. I was a little surprised that someone got in because I thought it was closed to friends only, but I guess not.
Well, so when you're setting up your...
It was Maiden Malice. Maiden,
yes.
Yeah, Maiden Malice.
When you're setting up the setting or I can't think, but whatever. When you're setting up the game, it's either private or public, and I assumed I couldn't invite you if it wasn't public, and I just never changed it. So
that's there you have it.
Goddamn. This is a juicy little episode, bro. When 3 hours, I didn't have to split it into 2 days.
That is true. All right. Well, guys, thanks to everyone who sent in questions. We appreciate you. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Look, it seems kind of rote and simple and obvious, but do you think that the community's take should just be Philip Hoy's question? Urge everyone to go check out NPS We Trust and ask what games from Microsoft they'd be most excited to see make their way to PlayStation finally. Or do you have a deeper burning question? Is our community's take, why is Phil Spencer the right fit for PlayStation's president?
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly the Xbox thing, even though I don't know. Yeah, the Xbox thing. Go with it.
The Xbox thing. So there you have it. The Xbox thing will be our community's take for next week. If you want to be part of the community's take, remember to follow us on social media. We are on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Triangle SQRD. We are in the Discord that we have for our show, which is linked in the description below, where you can join Chris, myself, and a ton of other patrons and listeners who enjoy the show, who talk with us about the trophy competition, what trophies they have going on. They vote for which games they want to do. We talk about music. We talk about movies. Talk about the biggest games, and anything else that you really want to talk to. And that's the easiest way to find us in our moment-to-moment, day-to-day life. So if you want to join those people, we'd be glad to have you. If you decide that you want to support the show with more than just your time, you can head over to patreon.com/Nartech and give as little as $1 per month and get a cool colored name in the Discord so everybody knows that you've got status over them. Because guess what, guys? The class system may be dead in the majority of the world, but it's alive and well in our Discord.
Facts.
Yeah. Bringing back the caste system, one server at a time. Dang, Chris. Hot take. I'm kidding. As a final shout out, Chris, first and foremost, thank you for joining me. I'm glad you were able to stick it out through your headache. I hope that your headache is leaving you like an evil spirit, leaving you with a sneeze. Well, I can understand that. Have you thought, Chris, that you may have a headache because of the spirits in your house?
Yes.
Fair. I'm glad that at least crossed your mind. Yeah. And if it hadn't, I wanted to make sure that I made it cross your mind.
Definitely made me think about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Chris.
Yeah?
M-word. All right. Shout out to our patrons. Dude, I fucking died when you said M-word critical or M critical the other day. That shit lost. That was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And yet, again, so very you. Guys, we always shout out our patrons at the end of every episode while the list is reasonable enough to do so. They are the reason this show continues to happen. They are the reason that you get it for free otherwise. We appreciate them more than we can express. So one thing that we do is we shout them out at the end of every episode. So without further ado, we'd like to shout out Duh Overlord, Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, Easton 328, Aztec King, Lecheon 69, The Lord Corgi, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Danny Villaiobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Donovan Williams, Matthew Green, and Sean Sanderud. Thanks to each and every one of you. See you next week.